it's incredibly rare for snow to happen in these places.
And we have started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 7 or 6, whichever one it is, of the Magnum Opi podcast. Today, we're going to be taking a look at Catch-22. And we are quite thin on the ground for members, which might give you an idea of the quality of the book. But let me do some introductions. So we've got Quackhouse.
Hello.
We have got Freelance Bishop.
Hello.
And we have Justine.
Greetings.
I think, Justine, you may be on the panel the person that tries to defend the book the most. I think there's going to be quite a lot of ripping into it.
I liked it.
You did like it? Okay. I went from disliking it to hating it to disliking it to finding it acceptable, which might be a strange route to take, but it's
a bit like the plot of the book, then.
Yeah. I can't find any other way to accurately describe it, but it's been a bumpy road. I'll say that. So, who wants to start off by trying their best to give a summary?
Shall I try?
Take the stage.
Okay, so you have Yossarian, which is who's a pilot in a bomber squadron in the Second World War in Italy. He is been flying for a while, and he's trying to get back home because there's a quota. You have to meet a certain number of bombing missions. But every time he gets to that close to that number, his commanding officer will increase that number again, so that they have to fly more missions. So he wants to get out, and then he wants to say, "Well, I don't want to fly because I went insane." And say, "Okay, if you're insane, then you can go home. But since you know that this is all insane, and that this means that you don't want to fly, means that you're actually sane, so you have to fly." So and they call it Catch-22. So basically, it doesn't matter what you do, you're doomed anyways. And that is basically the theme of the whole book. So almost every situation boils down to something where two opposing things just cancel each other out in some kind of insane way. I think kind of giving an image of how insane war is.
Like unwinnable situations through rules and bureaucracy.
And just also people who do strange things.
Yeah, most situations can be described as damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah, it's constantly replicated at the macro level and the micro level.
From the very first page, if I remember correctly, where there's a discussion of whether or not he has jaundice, and it kind of eases you into the concept of it being a Catch-22, where it says, well, he has a liver condition, but they can't quite figure out what it is. And the way that it's phrased in that very first page is kind of easing you in, like I say, to the concept. Who wants to give, like I say, it's similar to damned if you do, damned if you don't, but who wants to give an actual breakdown of what an actual Catch-22 is?
I can, if you want.
Yeah, I have got a little model afterwards to show that kind of shows it quite succinctly, but just to give a basic principle of what it is.
There's 7.
I'll come after.
So there's several Catch-22 things in the book, like situations that basically. But the main one is that if you are afraid of flying, then you're clearly not insane, because no sane person would be afraid of flying. But if you want to not fly, then that's hang on. My brain's gone to mush. But something like that. Sorry.
Yeah, you have to prove that you're crazy. You can't prove that you're crazy because not wanting to fly. There's I have a small quotation. Is it Scheisskopf, I think, says, "Don't sir me." Yes, sir. And say sir when you don't. This kind of micro.
Yeah, that whole dressing down and the trial of Clevenger. Is that how you pronounce it? I can't quite remember. that whole trial is actually, to me, one of my favorite examples of it, and it's one that, if the book had started off on that level and consistently maintained it, I would be much happier with it. But I feel like it takes some time to get to that levels of humor, because it is a satire. It's meant to be quite a black comedy, which obviously, from the quote that we have here, demonstrates that he wanted the reader to be amused, and he wanted them to be ashamed that they were amused. Do people actually think it works as a comedy? Did anyone find it particularly funny?
Yeah, I mean, especially in the beginning, and then it kind of grates on you a bit towards the middle, and then it kind of picks up again. I find that's kind of where I was with the book.
This picture of Hilary looks like Jacques Derrida.
Yeah, well, I mean, he fits into that kind of school of thought, so maybe he was going for that look.
I like the book. I had to laugh about it. Despite I think it's about 2 times too long than it actually should be. It drags a bit, but yeah, I can see this comedy, and I can see that when it was written, this would be like quite revolutionary. I think nowadays we kind of gotten used to this absurd kind of humor where we've seen more movies where this happens. Things like Brazil and other movies where bureaucrats are just making up rules and being so inefficient that actually nothing works. So
yeah, I mean,
the way the timeline bounces around as well, it's a lot like a lot of kind of modern films do that. So you see lots of things going on, and they all start to come together towards the end. Towards the climax.
Yeah, you have a couple of events, and you keep revisiting them, and gradually more and more information is revealed.
Mm-hmm.
And each of these refinements kind of grabs back to events that have been revealed in previous things. Like, so you have this one timeline where somebody's making this huge trading cartel, and he's basically selling things that they need supplies to fight, and he replaces them with IOUs. And then you know that happens, and then you have in another crucial moment, all the morphine ampules have been replaced with this IOUs, and then okay, that happened. If you didn't have that first thing, then it would look really strange, and now you go like, oh yeah, that happened.
Was it the parachutes in the first instance?
No, I think they had the parachute. Well, at some point they were in these life rafts, and they also had this going on because Milo, he sold everything, or he needed it for his what was it called, the syndicate.
Yeah.
Oh,
M&M Enterprises.
Yeah, and also the level of insanity is gradually increased. So if you would start halfway in the book, kind of you would get a sense what's going on, but you wouldn't accept it because things would happen which would if they would happen in a real war, they would even be like too much. The whole thing where at some point the Germans hire M&M Enterprises to bomb their own airfield.
See, I disagree with that. I think it should have started slower. I think it's already too ramped up at the very beginning for you to get a sense of that kind of gradual change from sanity to insanity. I think maybe if it had been a little bit more chronological at the beginning and then started getting more skittish and changing timeline, then I feel like that contrast that I was thinking about this point earlier, and the book that came to my mind when I was thinking about it was something like when we did Lord of the Flies. You look at the man at the very end of the book that the sailor that finds the children, and it brings that kind of stark reality back to you because you've been on a journey from them from the beginning to where they are at the end, and that sailor is used as the contrast because he snaps you back to what should be normality.
Well,
I feel like it fails to have that.
Yeah,
it gets less like more normality as it progresses, if anything.
Lord of the Flies nicely bookends that. So the sailor at the end, or the soldier at the end, he basically is in the same state the kids were at the beginning of the book. Like we're trying to keep civil society going.
Yeah, and I feel like it would have benefited from having that type of character.
Well, yeah.
Insanity is one of the main themes it's going for, so I feel like that would really demonstrate it a lot better. But
there are no sane people in the book.
As an attack on bureaucracy, I think it's very successful. and as you say, we've become quite familiar with this mode. Perhaps like Kafka also had something of this, you know.
Funny you say that, because one of the quotes that I took, and unfortunately I couldn't find who it was attributed to, they described Heller's work as if Kafka wrote Abbott and Costello, which I think actually summarizes it pretty well.
That is a pretty good summary. In terms of, there are other parts that sort of, as an attack on the military, I think it's more controversial, and it's obviously like one thing that we pick up quickly is that it's the precursor to MASH, right? MASH is the ultimate kind of left liberal, you know, satire on kind of, I guess you'd say, like conservative military.
If I understood it correctly, then this was not so much a attack on the Second World War, but more on the Korean and the Vietnam War, especially the Vietnam War, which is where you had a lot of statistics going on, and which is a lot of propaganda. While during the Second World War, people still had the feeling that they were fighting a real enemy, so they were fighting Hitler and Germany. So there was more like a reason to fight.
And that's,
one of the sorry, you carry on, Justine.
It's sort of palatable. It would have been palatable to his audience only because it is set in Italy, and the Germans are less like if he were fighting the Germans, you know, and bombing Germany, let's say. I think his audience would have found it less palatable because we're expected to be very somber and kind of treat the fight against the Germans as a sacred mission, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's perhaps not. It's not quite the same in the Italian context, even though they were allies. So I think it would have, like, his kind of dismissiveness or sort of nihilism about the general purpose of the mission would have been less palatable.
Well, they're basically fighting the Germans in Italy.
They are. I know, but it's the fact that they're in Italy. You know, and it just sort of puts it at a bit of a remove, I think, mentally.
I think this might be a little bit of a disconnect with the book because he took a considerable amount of time to write it, and I think it came out in '61, if I remember from the first slide correctly, and it took him like a decade to write. So it wouldn't have been in reference to. I mean, it could have been the Korean. When did the Korean War start? It was early '50s, wasn't it? I can't quite remember. Was it 54? I might be pulling that date out of nowhere, but it may have gradually morphed into more of a criticism of the contemporary wars, but definitely at the time of writing the very beginning, it would have just been specifically a criticism of World War II. But yeah, like I say, it took him like a decade to write. So
I do wonder how people responded to that. You know, like whether they found this to be offensive.
Well, we will look at. There we are.
50
to 53. So yeah, it could well have been related to it when he first wrote, but a lot of the content in the book is about his personal experiences. Even though, I mean, this is Wikipedia, so take this source for what you will. When I was doing some background reading onto it, there was just a part that said it is generally agreed that his time serving in the military did not influence his writing on Catch-22. And I was like, who has agreed that? it most definitely has.
Yeah.
And several of the characters that he's written into the book are based on the people that he served with. So I don't understand how that could be. Oh yeah, we have decided that his experiences in war have not affected his view of war. I mean, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I don't understand how it couldn't.
I don't think he would have written it if he hadn't served. But just on that, actually, just a couple of just to do some background bits on the author before we carry on. So like I say, he did serve. He was in the. He served as. He was a pilot. No, he's a bombardier. Sorry, and he did a lot of runs. He did 60 missions, but a lot of them were milk runs. So it could be that partly some of the success that he felt that he was being given when he returned home was unearned because so many of his runs were milk runs. That might just be me pathologizing his thoughts.
That would explain the ending where.
Yeah.
What's Heller's background? Was he German Jewish?
He was Russian Jewish, and they were a socialist Jewish household, and he went into advertising and TV script writing. So all of that kind of background knowledge to me kind of makes sense as what you read in that book.
Kind of like sort of a sacred cow in a way for to make fun of. It's like the episode of Seinfeld where they make out during Schindler's List, right? Like, isn't it? Kind of?
Well, we will come on to that because the critical reception part to me is probably one of the most interesting background readings that I did, because it initially didn't take on really at all in America, but it was actually the UK that popularized it, and then a couple of years later, when it got released as a paperback, it started to become more popular in the US. So whether or not it was just the UK elites that decided that this would be their anti-war tome, or whether or not it was obviously used as an anti-war messaging symbol, but why that was, who knows? Because initially in the release, it was kind of popular in the East Coast of America, but a lot of the Americans, I've got some quotes that demonstrate my thoughts on it, but a lot of people didn't really take kindly to it when it first came out.
well, it barely mentioned the war, really. I mean, it could be any war. I mean, I know it does mention the Germans, but it's not focusing on fighting
the Germans. That's what I mean.
People, is it?
Well, there's not a single German that you come across in the entire book.
No, but they're not even bombing Germany, are they? They're not even bombing anything in particular. It just mentions these places, and nobody really knows why they're bombing them. They just want a nice photograph.
The structure is like they go on a bombing run, and then they come back, and then you have summary, and then stuff happens in the camp. That most stuff happens in the camp, and not during bombing runs. It's mostly flashbacks, because a lot of stuff happened, and the Yossarian doesn't want to fight anymore. So. And the question is, why doesn't he want to fly anymore? And basically, you get more and more exposition on more and more characters. And at one point, you have so many characters that it's hard to keep them all apart.
And hard to write a slideshow.
Yeah. And all of them are male, because all the female characters are more or less either all the same, like they're being sexualized objects, except for a few. And so that's Nately's whore, who she has a kind of a special role, but the rest is like they're just like there as entertainment for the men.
I didn't find any contemporary criticisms of it, but I imagine there's most definitely been several papers written about the toxic masculinity of Catch-22, and they probably would have phrased it in some pun of the Catch-22 of females in Heller's work or some.
It reminds me a bit of how madmen treat their secretaries. And given the fact that he's in advertising, it all starts to make sense.
Yeah. And he was also writing. He wrote a play that was where is it called? We Bombed in New Haven, which was again anti-Vietnam War play that was being produced at the time. He wrote a sequel to Catch-22 in 1994, so considerably after. I haven't read the synopsis of it, but it's called Closing Time, and it develops Milo and Yossarian. I don't really understand why the sequel was made.
Yeah, I remember something about this. It's an interesting. I mean, I feel like he helped to set the tone of a certain kind of liberal in the 60s. Someone who has like a lot of contempt for sort of patriotism, military. I have mixed feelings about these things, but I don't think it.
It's not particularly nuanced, is it?
Yeah.
And I think that I'm probably on the same page with you, where even if they shouldn't have been in some of these wars, or we can have disagreements about why they were there or what they were doing there, this kind of criticism, to me, comes from a very specific angle that doesn't help anyone.
Yeah.
And I don't. Maybe that's why I'm so agitated whilst reading the book.
Yeah, it's this kind of like, sort of cheap type of existentialism where hey man, we're only here for the pleasure in life. There's nothing else. So don't ask us to risk our lives for some sort of transcendent good. Yeah. We're trying to get
a lot of these war films and books, they all have at least one character, even the ones that are pretty positive towards war. They all have at least one character who's like the anti-war guy. I've been watching quite a lot of World War II based films over the past few weeks.
When I was tidying up my notes as I go through the book, I try to make notes to make sure we got enough to cover. And several times I just written, but like war is bad, man. And that is basically the summary of the book. So what else have we got? There's just a couple of other points I wanted to make. Sorry, you carry on, Justine.
Just like, it's not enough just to say, as you say, like, it's not enough just for them just to laugh off war and say war is bad. Because obviously, like, sometimes war is necessary. I won't say that this war actually was necessary, like we all think it was, but sometimes we have to defend ourselves. Sometimes, and there do have to be warriors. It's just a fact, So it's this kind of lazy, kind of cynicism or nihilism about.
It's definitely nihilistic.
Yeah,
it's a difficult balance as well, because you've got that kind of group that will say any type of war is bad, and then when you try and counter that and say there might be justifiable wars, you'll then get tarnished with the brush of the kind of neocon wars that we have now, where it's wars are justified when you're trying to spread liberal democracy across the world. So it's a tightrope that people that disagree with both of those camps have to walk, because you'll get bashed as this flower power child from the neocons if you disagree with the wars that they might be trying to start. And then from the other side of it, you'll get pushed into that camp if you say that there might be some justifiable wars. So yet again, it's a sandwich in which if you don't take up either of those two sides, it doesn't matter, because you're going to get beaten into one of them anyway.
Yeah, but it doesn't vilify the enemy in this story, does it at all?
Well, the enemy is the hierarchy.
Yeah, well, and the way Yossarian sees it is that everybody's just out to get him. He just takes it personally. It's like, why shouldn't I feel like Germans are spending all this money just to kill me? Because that's how it feels. It's like the whole of the society's against him.
That's kind of a good gag, just like this, delusion or whatever that everyone is trying to kill you. It's kind of a good gag, but if you take it at face value, it's also just sort of narcissistic.
Yeah. It's very. I put down as one of the themes solipsism, because everything is the world revolves around me for Yossarian, and we're kind of bouncing left, right, and center with some of the things that we're discussing. But I mean, it kind of suits the book. One of the other themes that we will come to is the constant references to self-pity in the book. Self-pity is the most frustrating human emotion, I think, on the planet. So it might be another reason why. I'm so anti this book, because everyone is just woe is me. Yeah, it's like if Frankenstein was on steroids when it came to those self-pity moments. It's so frustrating to read, especially when that's your protagonist.
Well, what amazed me reading comment sections of like various videos I've been watching around the subject and stuff is how many people seem to say that this is their favorite book, or
the best,
how much they love it.
Novel. It's funny, because when it first came out, it wasn't awarded anything. It had no recognition in terms of like accolades. There were some people that liked it, but it was few and far between. Yeah, but now you've got so many people saying this is my favorite novel of the 20th century, and I just think, really? We've only done 6 or 7 books, and we've already read 2 that I prefer.
Yeah,
but some of them are not from the 20th century.
Well, the ones that we have done from the 20th century. Lord of the Flies.
Yeah, true.
Anyway, let's move on from Hella. The only other thing I wanted to mention with him, he was very good friends with Kurt Vonnegut. Yeah. Which, have you read Slaughterhouse-Five? I've not actually.
I
gotten
have,
around to it yet.
but it's so long ago, I can't remember. I enjoyed
Yeah.
it.
Do you know if it was a similar feel to Catch-22?
Yes, yeah, that's I can have a vibe. But Kurt Vonnegut, yeah, he's brilliant at these kinds of jokes, and these kinds of effects.
It reminded me of like a Coen Brothers comedy.
Yeah.
That kind of feel.
I mean, I probably say some of the times they're better written. Actually, this was the other funny thing I wanted to bring up, is that originally it was intended to be a novelette as opposed to a full novel.
That would have been good. It should have been a novel.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it would have been a lot more easy to get through if it was shorter. Anyway, let's move on to the influences. Right. What a lovely lineup of people to have as your influences.
It's so bloody.
Yeah, I think we've covered both of them previously, but you've got Camus and Jean-Paul Sartre. The absurdism coming out of this time, those two were the main figureheads of it. The book on the right is by a Czech author called Jaroslav Hasek. It's called The Good Soldier, and it's a satire based on the First World War, which I actually think would be quite interesting to take a look at, because I don't really know of any other satires that were coming out about the First World War. But if you're going to describe a pointless war for any of these, that would definitely be an interesting one to read.
Blackadder's probably the nearest.
Yeah, that was the only thing that was coming to mind when I thought about anything that kind of rips into it a little bit as being completely pointless.
World War I, there's not even a clear narrative about what it was all for.
They don't even bother teaching it now, and they because it's so hard to give a narrative that fits into progressivism or any kind of modern day notion of history. It's basically just pushed under the rug because it doesn't fit any neat little box.
What about as a precondition for World War II? Do they still teach that?
Yeah, so I mean, this is just speaking from my experience in the education system. They did teach Weimar Germany, so they obviously touched on elements of World War One when discussing that, but it was just like a peripheral event.
Yeah, it was more like the Kaiser was a madman, decided he was going to go to war, decided Germany wanted some of its territory back that it felt that it missed out on when it got formed, and that was kind of.
It's basically Germans are crazy, and look at how crazy they got. They did use the Treaty of Versailles as a way of trying to, semi-explain the rise of Nazism, but I probably should of mid-century Germanism. Sorry, Susan Wojcicki. But other than that, it's not really discussed.
Yeah, well, it's getting talked about a lot at the minute, isn't it? But
with good reason. I think it's definitely something we should take a look at and try and pick apart and figure out what the hell happened.
Some people say it was sort of it was just one big war, part one and part two, kind of, because the part one.
I subscribe to that notion.
Yeah, it was definitely an interlude.
War.
There's a very good book called The Rites of Spring. I've forgotten the. It's a history of World War I, which I read about 15 years ago to try to understand World War I, because it sort of occurred to me I've never really been taught why this war happened and what that's quite recommended. And he talks about.
Can you repeat the title? Sorry, I'm going to make note of that one.
The Rite of Spring. Yeah, it talks about sort of starts off with the ballet, the modernist ballet, and goes into how sort of the crowds were. So he suggests that everybody was really sort of pumped for it initially. All the people were sort of whipped up. It's good.
Yeah, I've heard that said in other kind of period-y type things.
Yeah, they like to use the powder keg analogy. The other influence I did want to make note of, but I don't really think it was an influence. It was more just multiple references in the book. Is Dostoevsky? I think it was Dostoevsky that he mentions a few times.
He mentions Crime and Punishment.
Yeah, beating of the horse. And...
Yeah, wherein the protagonist Raskolnikov murders, I don't think it's landlady, but somebody who has money with an axe and steals her money, and then the rest of the book is basically haunted by the thing that he did.
He justifies. He thinks he's a Superman. He can get away with this, right?
That's his justification, but in the end, his own consciousness or subconsciousness catches up with him, and the only salvation for him is to confess. But he does reference it because it's also a book about slowly going insane and paranoia. And if only the hero would have taken some different choices, or the protagonist, have taken some different choices in life, he wouldn't be in that situation. So,
all right, let's move on to the legacy. Is it left behind? Yeah, just in that nice little box there, it's got laid out in a very simple form what exactly the Catch-22 is. The other things that we got on there, like you said, MASH was heavily inspired by the creator Robert Altman. He said that Catch-22 was one of the biggest influences. As we've previously discussed, a lot of people have put it up there as the #1 novel of the 20th century. I think those people are mad, but it's definitely
maybe they just read one novel. That's also
well, yeah, that's true.
I mean, it's well written. It's suitably complicated, and
look, it's not awful.
It's clever.
It's a lot better. Just on the other pictures we got there, one of the ones I just wanted to mention is that there's an insufferable amount of journalists that use the phrase Catch-22 when they just want a cheap headline.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, what do you think is more common for people to hack journalists to use Catch-22 or Fight Club in their titles? Like the first rule of X is you don't speak about X. Or Catch-22.
I think Catch-22 is more used by journalists, but that's just an opinion.
Yeah, I'd probably agree on that one. The other things we got on there, there's a 1970 film and a 2018 miniseries. I think, has anyone else watched it apart from me and Quack House, the film?
I have. No, I don't think I've seen it. I've seen clips from. Yeah,
I watched it last night.
Yeah, I would recommend it. I think it captures the spirit as opposed to the text itself.
I feel like the more modern TV show has more of the kind of farcical, gets across that better. The film, I don't know, the film, you just can't fit this book into a couple of hours. You just can't. There's too many I know they cut a few characters out, but there's too many characters. There's too much going on. Some of the stuff I'd have kept, they cut, and I don't know. It's a hard one.
I seem to recall seeing the film, the part where, the scene that he's traumatized by the death of Snowden, and in the plane, the boy dying. And, I think they evoke that quite effectively.
Yeah. John Voight is great in it, and so is Orson Welles. Orson Welles is great in everything, but apart from wine commercials. But he's fantastic in it. He plays General Dreedle, I think.
I mean, the film in terms of the way it's shot, it's amazing. Like some of the shots, especially early on in the film, the camera, just really nice shots, and it is a beautifully shot. But the modern series, to me, I was not taken up with. Yossarian is actively hateable, I think, in the modern day series. But the other bits that we got on there, there's just this weird obsession with musicians to use Catch-22 in their titles of music, and I put an album cover there. Now, this album came out in 2002 by a band called Hypocrisy, and did that entice people in 2002 to purchase this album?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Would any
It's
of the
awful.
panel have purchased that walking into HMV in 2002 and saw that on the shelf? But
Oh yeah, no. Skulls, a number, and a catchy title, a completely unreadable font for the band name. Yeah, that's an insta buy.
Yeah, I bet there's
Take my dollar reduce.
I bet there's a load of mid-wit songs.
I've got a list here. Funny you say that. Pink, Billy Squire, who sounded like, I don't know, David Bowie, trying like an American David Bowie. It was a bit strange. Anne Marie, which is a modern musician who makes like popcorn for the ears. It's just like absolutely vapid and disappears the minute it goes in your ear. Who else was there? Oh, that was it. And Tinchy Strider had an album called Catch-22, which, if anyone remembers Tinchy Strider, please try not to.
Is this where the other video comes from that you?
Yes, yeah. So it sent me down a very dark rabbit hole where I eventually found that there was a rap.
How could it die?
A rap CD release between Tinchy Strider and the Chuckle Brothers. So that's some information you probably didn't know.
Catch-22 is like when people say it's ironic, right?
Yeah. Oh, so it's funny you say that. This is how much I didn't want to do some research for the actual book. I went down a pathway of looking at all the music. Anne Marie, in her song called Catch-22, there's literally a line in the rap that says that references what's her name? Who sung Ironic? Morissette.
Yes.
It's Morissette.
Yeah. So yeah, they just throw it out there because it's a term that people recognize and they just want to seem intelligent, basically.
Yeah. The joke of it ironic was that it wasn't really the example.
Yeah.
Back in my day, a rap album was still called a spoken word album. I'm just saying.
That's poetry, man.
Yeah. William
Anyway.
Shatner was one of the greatest rappers of his day. Look it up.
This is how much I want to avoid talking about the book. Did you know that there was a Joe Pesci album release where he raps about being a gangster?
I'm gonna look that up right now. That's
There's an album.
Anyway, that's that. Oh, the other picture I put obviously there was Kent State University, just to show that it was later used a lot as an in the anti-war movement as this kind of centerpiece of look at how corrupt the military-industrial complex is, man, kind of piece. So, suppose I can't push it off any longer. Let's move on to the actual book. So, I found an absolute madman had put out a timeline. So, I've taken that timeline and we'll go through that, and then at the end of it, I've got all of the characters that are featured and we can discuss them if there's anything that we've missed along the way. So this is hard to pick apart. Like, what we'll do, we'll go through the slides, and if there's any comments that people want to make to go into a deeper discussion, then just let me know. But looking at this list here, should we start off by discussing the increase of required missions by Colonel Cathcart, the ever-increasing amount of missions?
Yeah, sure. You know why he keeps on increasing it. So there's this subplot where it starts out with letters to deceased pilots, to their families and such, that the Colonel Cathcart wants to have a promotion, and for that he wants to be in some kind of magazine. So he wants journalists to notice him. So he has all these plots in order to be noticed. So it starts out with that he wants to have that all these letters that are sent with condolences, that they should be written. And some of them, and that they're really ridiculous in the end. And then he realizes that if he just does his utmost best by having his men fly more missions than anybody else should, then they would be noticed and then they would be promoted. And that's the reason why he keeps on increasing it. To the chagrin of all the pilots, because about 40 missions is the amount you have to fly before you're rotated out. And and they know this happens to other parts of the Air Force.
There are a lot of examples of sort of officers, risking other people's lives when, not being, not being safe.
Or just trying to avoid anything like major, who doesn't see anybody. He just doesn't do anything. He has been given this role. He's not in his element. He's there completely by accident, and he just tries to get out of it. And so some of these characters don't do anything. Some of them, they do stuff, but it seems to be completely disjoint from what the rest is doing. The people who run the show, and some of them, they are just doing stuff for their own gain. And
yeah, there's frequent references to them, to the higher ups in the military,
and
saying that they're brave because they're brave enough to put other people's lives on the line, basically.
Yeah, and then a lot of these characters can't understand why, like, characters like Yossarian don't want to do the brave thing, or they don't want to fight. They just can't understand it.
Yeah, that kind of disconnect where the point trying to be made is that Yossarian is the most sane person in this group, but everyone else is referring to him as crazy because he's not willing to follow follow what's being told of him, basically. And probably the closest, the most opposite counterpart to him is Clevenger, sorry, because he is so willing to follow every order that's given to him.
But then you've got like Orr, for instance, who's kind of in the same boat as Yossarian. He wants to get out of there, but he's being more proactive about it.
Yeah, well, yeah, Orr is actually one of the few highlights of the book in terms of characters to me, when it comes to those like low-ranking members, because he's someone that is portraying himself as an idiot, so that he can plan his escape, basically. But we'll touch on that, like the characters specifically, when we get there, I suppose. But yeah, the other, like you say, when it comes to the flights, a lot of what Colonel Cathcart does is because he's looking to climb the ranks, and that's a big theme as well. Is everyone that they have, it's kind of going to that absurdist notion where nothing is actually meaningful, so they're just trying to assert meaning onto anything that they can. So because it's generally agreed in the military that climbing the ladder is beneficial, that's all that they can really latch onto, and so that's what they're doing. So for Colonel Cathcart, he's trying to impress his higher ups, one, by increasing the amount of missions more than any other colonel around him, but on top of that, he's also trying to basically he's trying to get them to fly enough missions so that enough people die, so that he can send out enough letters to be mentioned in the newspaper.
Which one is it that's one in the aerial photograph? Is that him as well, or is that which?
I think so, but I can't quite remember.
Yeah, like the whole purpose of the mission is to get a good photo. They don't care if they hit the target.
They want to have a nice bomb pattern. That's more important. So hitting the target is not important, but a nice bomb pattern, because it will look nice in the reports.
That actually goes to something that I think is done better in the 1970 film than it is in the book, where the bomb. So they all get awarded the medals because they've got such a tight bomb pattern, but the area that they bombed is just the middle of the sea, because they released too early. And to me, I actually felt it was one of.
Oh, he's gone.
Oh, let's take over. So about this timeline, which is completely not how the book actually works. So somebody actually made a timeline, putting everything chronological, and then you go like, oh yeah, this is actually what happened. But when I'm reading it, I go like, who the hell is Colonel Nevers? Because apparently he dies, but he's not mentioned that much. And the book basically starts, I think it's on the next slide if we ever get there, because nobody here has control over it. But the book basically starts halfway down this timeline when Yossarian is in the hospital, and then just half keeps going forward, but at the same time you have a lot of flashbacks. So all this stuff gets fleshed out. And the only way actually to kind of keep track of where you are in the time is the number of missions that's being mentioned, and how big the M&M Enterprises by Milo is. So while we're waiting for the internet to be rebuilt in the UK and the Albion to return, I'll guess we'll just talk a bit about M&M Enterprises while we're here and how insane that is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is getting better.
I mean, see,
There he is.
I'm back. Just bear with me.
I'm going to say the idea of taking a good photograph as opposed to missing to getting the target would be okay if it weren't for the fact that the wrong people might be hit.
Yeah, well, I can't remember in the book, but in the film, basically Yossarian decides that because he's the lead bomber, he decides that he doesn't want to bomb this place that it's supposed to be bombing because it turns out it's just basically a village with no strategic value, no factories, no nothing. So he decides to drop his bombs early, just in the sea. Much to the.
I think in the book it is just the town that they bomb because someone says that they think they're bombing it to try and cause a rock slide to block the road so that troops can't advance, but it's not actually planned to do that at all. It's just an area that they can do a tight bomb formation.
Another thing that's ironic is Colonel Cathcart wants to make a promotion, but almost every promotion in this book is accidental. Yossarian is made a captain just because it looks nicer and to the outside, despite the fact that he basically screwed up. But it was easier for them to promote him than to demote him because he did something which was good. So it's really odd how this basically incompetence keeps floating upward. And at some point we have a competent, at the end when the offer is made, we have a competent military guy and he doesn't want to be promoted. He's happy where he is. So
there's a lot of people appealing to the greed or the aspirations of the person in command in order to get their own way. There's a lot of that.
I think that promotion, accidental promotion, is used a lot as a way of saying that military command is all incompetent, and it's basically deconstructing that hierarchy in the entire system, because obviously the two people that we find throughout the book have the most power or most influential are Milo, who is just a mess hall worker, he's just a chef, and Wintergreen, who is not even
private first class.
He's an ex-private first class. He's been demoted so many times that he's trying to go into minus ranks and become an ex-general because he wants to get demoted so much.
But he's not in the army anymore.
Yeah, so I think that's another way of the book it's kind of that. It's a little bit of a proletariat versus the bourgeois, but set in a military.
Yeah, there is something of that.
It's like a stripping down of those in charge, I think, is what he's going for.
And don't forget the best general. Wow, best general ever, which is General Colonel Major Shaiskov, which can't be his real name because it's literally German for Major Shithead.
Shithead, yeah. Even we know that.
So. It feels like all these nicknames for them, and there's a lot of rhyming going on. Colonel Cathcart, Major, things like that.
Yeah, Chaplain. Karen.
I was going to say Milo, Mindbender.
Yeah, and Chaplain, Tapman, Yossarian, the Asarian. It's all.
It feels like being at university or some other boys' club where everybody's giving a nickname based on what he looked like.
Either that or it feels like being in a Roald Dahl book where everyone's profession kind of rhymes with their name, that kind of feel like a children's nursery rhyme or something.
Some of the nicknames might be especially for the higher up, they might be just mental nicknames, right? Something that you call him to yourself. Scheißkopf. As opposed to all the guys called,
That being said, him having a German background would make sense given his love of organizing the troops. But
I would reduce that to Prussian.
Yeah, yes. I don't think Scheißkopf a particularly Prussian name though.
I don't think a lot of people from Germany are named Scheißkopf because it doesn't sound any better in German either. So.
Right. I think you're going to start on when I disappeared. Going to start on. Milo as well, and M&M Enterprises.
I almost beat you to the punch. Milo basically is the mess hall officer, and I think it starts with eggs, that they want to get fresh eggs. And there's this mystery where he buys eggs at 7 cents and sells them at 5 cents and still he turns a profit, which is insane, of course, because if you know anything about economics, is that you should sell for more than you buy them in order to make a profit. And it turns out that it's actually a racket, because he actually doesn't sell them for 7. He sells them to himself for 7 because he actually buys them for 3 somewhere else. And this whole explanation is insane as well, because the more Yossarian asks about it, the more vague Milo becomes about it.
It's going to get a bit convoluted, doesn't it, the more it goes on?
Yeah, here we go. So
I prepared a slide.
So the Sicilians basically.
Do you think libertarians would approve of some?
This is just creative bookkeeping at its best. So to be honest,
you were cutting out there, Justine. Sorry. Oh,
yeah, she's gone.
The madness continues. Yeah, there we are. Yeah, you're back with us.
Oh dear.
Gone again.
I was just saying, I wonder if libertarians would.
You're still cutting in and out.
Oh no. Don't know what to do.
See, the madness is spreading. I'm getting booted. Justine is popping in and out. Catch-22 is becoming reality.
We thought you got cancelled.
Well, I did say the mid-century German word, so yeah. It's possible. Yeah, I tried to do a basic breakdown of it to explain it, and I may have. This is the most simplified version that I could come up with. Is that in Sicily he purchases the egg for 1 cent. He sells the eggs to himself to inflate the price, and then buys them back off himself at the now raised general market price because he has inflated it by selling it at such a high price, and then sells it at a discounted price to the mess hall because he's the only one that's going to be able to sell it at 5 cents as opposed to sell it at 7, because he has actually not made any kind of loss because all of those sellings have just been internal and therefore aren't actually happening. Is that the impression you got as well? Like all of those?
Yeah. The only thing I would like to add is that it looks like that this is impossible because he's increasing the supply and at the same time raising the price, which wouldn't make any sense. But it's not an open market. He's basically selling it to himself. So this whole thing is just a creative bookkeeping. And so when people look at his books, it looks like he's making a loss. So he's benevolent. But when you look at the other half, which you don't see, because these are just companies selling to each other, which he also owns, and then you see how he actually is making a profit. But he's also preventing nobody else is buying them for 7 cents, because if they would buy them from him for 7 cents, then they would make a loss. So he basically pushes out all his competition that way. And Milo seems to have his fingers in more and more things and have more and more influences to the absurd at some point, because they go to some town and he turns out to be the mayor. And then he also turns out to be the mayor of Rome and the Sultan of somewhere in Persia, and in Egypt he's a noble and things like, just because he's doing all these trades.
And there are rainforest tribes that have, statues dedicated to Milo.
And everybody loves him.
And at some point, he just uses bombers to ship everything, and they fly to Germany and to Sweden, and he basically at some point is both delegating the bomb run and is hired to do the anti-aircraft guns to shoot them down. So he's hired by the Germans to do defense. Because they're an enterprise, so he's also a private military company using the equipment of the Air Force, and basically claims that everybody profits from it in somehow. So it's really weird.
Well, everyone likes him. Yeah, everyone likes him because everyone thinks they're getting a good deal off of him. But obviously, all he's doing is manipulating the market so that everyone else is having to sell at an inflated cost. and he can undercut it because he's manipulating the price so that everyone else has to go higher than him. So no one's actually getting a better deal because of him. He's artificially inflating everything.
And the worst part is that he bought Egyptian cotton, and he just didn't buy some of it. He bought all of it, the whole harvest. But he discovers that he can't sell it, so he's actually losing all his money on this, and that frustrates him. So
he agrees to buy it all, doesn't it? And it turns out that they're just getting all the old cotton as well and selling that to him.
Well,
so they'll never run out.
Yeah, basically they're buying all the cotton and then selling it again to him. So they're basically fleecing him. So then he tries to get rid of the cotton by covering it in chocolate and turning it into food, which Yossarian hates, but then some colonel thinks is a great idea.
I don't remember that part. Who is a colonel agrees to it? I can't remember. Yeah,
well, even though it makes a very brief reference, doesn't it? Later on, that I can't remember, the colonel says something about how great the cotton can the candy could the chocolate covered candies cotton is.
When Milo wants to fly more missions, and then they decide that the other people should fly the missions because Milo is too important, and because Milo feels guilty that he actually didn't fly all the missions like the other people.
Another of these economic examples is the farmer who gets paid by the government paid well for every bushel of alfalfa he does not grow.
Yes, that's Major Major's father, who is probably a character that is the most on the nose for Hella's kind of look at this person that's trying to be an upstanding American, but everything they do and believe is actually hypocritical. Where he's someone that says, taking any kind of handouts is immoral, and you're just a good for nothing if you need help by the government. But his entire income is earned through not growing crops because he's getting subsidized for every crop that doesn't grow properly.
Which is essentially how farming works. So.
Well, yeah, especially when you're in the EU.
Yossarian has a lot of contempt for sort of patriotic Americans or old-fashioned Americans.
Yes, it's basically for Yossarian. If it's not self-preservation, he doesn't want to know.
Yeah, that's right. Like he heaps a lot of scorn on sort of mom and apple pie type characters.
Well, yeah, which again goes to characters are probably not named what they actually would be called, because you've got someone called Appleby who's like described as being as American as apple pie, that kind of atmosphere. So just another probably the last comment on this list, the poisoning of the potatoes or of the mash. This kind of is one of the first examples that we have of when we're not exactly given misdirection, but he does do it quite well, and I would appreciate it more if the book didn't annoy me so much. Where he will drab information. So at first we think that we're not sure who poisoned the mash, and then we're told that it's Milo because he wanted to prove that no one had taste buds good enough to recognize that they were being poisoned. But as we get deeper into the book, we find it was actually Yossarian that got the first chef, whose name I can't remember, to poison it because he wanted everyone to be sick, so they couldn't fly the mission that they were set on.
Yeah, well, a big part of it, isn't it, that they know that they can't fly if the weather's bad, and that if the weather's good, it takes a day to dry out the field. So if they poison everybody on the day that it's dry, even if the next day is dry, they'll be too ill to fly. Yeah,
exactly. So it gives them at least another couple of days for it to rain again.
But yeah, wasn't there another part with the food as well, that they were trying to prove that that men would eat a certain thing? I can't remember what it was now. Been a week since I read it.
Yeah, well, it was this. So it was him. The rumor that was going around is that Milo poisoned the mash because he wanted to show everyone that they could literally be eating soap in mash and not recognize it because they're their tastes are so philistine, basically. But obviously that turns out not to be true. It's just that that's a story that Yossarian's spreading to make people think it wasn't him.
Or was it trying to bulk out the food with something? I can't remember. Sorry,
could be. I don't know. I don't know. It's a big book, and I can't remember if there's another part of it. There's a lot of mentions of food. I have a very small amount of background noise of like a slight echo from someone. I think it. Yeah, it's gone now. Okay, not sure what that was. Right, I'll move on to the next slide now. Then. Yeah. So again, there's another poisoning on there, and another thing that we find when it comes to the raising of the missions, basically everything that's used as a reason to raise missions is completely unrelated to there being a reason to raise missions. Most prominently is the death of Kid Samson and the death of the Doctor. Their deaths are used as reasons to increase the amount of missions because there's fewer men to fly them, even though they're getting new recruits sent in. And there's basically an entire new batch of people to fly the missions now. So that point is null and void, basically.
It feels like corporate decisions that are not rooted in actual things that are happening.
Yeah.
So what you have in some top-down structures where somebody will make a decision way remote from where actually everything is happening, and then people are really affected by this. Get your red stapler taken away, for example.
Yeah. So aside from the poisoning, I think going down the list, the next thing to touch on, which we spoke about very briefly before, is probably the death of Snowden.
This is kind of the pivotal moment for Yossarian, because that actually causes his breakdown. He sees this kid die in his arms and dies horribly. And from that moment on, basically he basically doesn't want to fly anymore.
Yeah, so as you can see here on the list, it shows where the beginning of the book is, and it's actually quite a while until quite a few chapters in until we get anything that's prior to that beginning chapter. And it does show that even though Yossarian's never he's never patriotic and he's never really keen on being in the military, the death of Snowden does significantly change his outlook to being one of, trying to avoid it, to actively, basically getting driven mad because he's witnessed this death. Because it's, well, as we find it, the second to last chapter, it's incredibly grisly, and he tries to help Snowden by patching up his wounds, but he basically finds a wound in his leg and patches it all up, to only discover that there's a much larger wound on his side. And when he tries to help him, he falls apart, basically.
I have a strong memory of that from the film. And how
Mm-hmm. And that section, I think, is very well written. And actually, all of the flights, when it's taken a lot more seriously, I feel are very well written. And it's not to say that some of his, more gallows humor sections aren't well written, but I think he would have done very well at writing a serious novel. Obviously that's not where his heart is, but I think he could have pulled it off very well.
The death in the film, they're all done really well. They're all, they all hit quite hard, the way they're described.
Yes, although I do think that the death of again, Kid Samson is not meant to be entirely serious. I think that goes back to his quote where he's saying that he wants people to be disgusted at the fact that they're amused that he's we'll describe later what happens to him.
I know, but after the actual death, the way it's described and the way everybody feels, it's
well, this maybe I'm just maybe I've just got a perverse humor. I didn't find it particularly funny, but I feel like the intention there was to be, look at how absurd this is. but you shouldn't be finding it absurd. You should be just finding it revolting. I don't think it was intended to be completely serious with it.
You talked about trying to catch people in this situation, in the situation, to create this kind of sense of being caught and laughing at something without wanting to.
Sorry, I missed the tail end of that.
Just Heller talks explicitly about attempting to make the audience regret their laughing at.
Yeah, well, yeah. So on the slide for him, as just on that author section, he's quoted as saying that when he wrote it, he wanted people to be amused but be disgusted that they were amused, or embarrassed, or whatever the word he used. So, yeah, he was trying to catch people out in finding it funny, basically, in some of the sections here. What else have we got? So Yossarian being naked at Snowden's funeral, so you can kind of see him beginning to crack. It's also, in some ways, it's kind of a reference to the Emperor with no clothes, especially with Dreidel. I think Dreidel actually is, in some ways, one of the closest characters to Yossarian that's in the higher ups, where he just doesn't really care as long as people listen to him. He doesn't have any pretense to what's happening. Which I think Yossarian can probably respect more than anyone, because he's not even pretending that there's any higher purpose, which for Heller is probably what he believes the military to be, where it's just this, power system. The same way that they describe military drills and military marches, where all of it's meaningless. It's just a way of them trying to exert their power over us and show that we're, subservient to them, that kind of attitude.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that people will have to say on Yossarian being naked at the funeral? Sentence I didn't think of you saying.
Yeah, because he continues to be naked for quite a bit afterwards as well, doesn't he?
Yes, yeah.
I think it's part of his ploy to convince everybody that he's insane.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question as to whether or not he was using it as a ploy to show that he was crazy, or whether or not he did have an actual snap and go a little bit loopy.
I mean, it felt quite heartfelt, when they're explaining to the other people why that he's not wearing any clothes. I can't remember who has the conversation, asking why he's not wearing clothes, and it's because his clothes are covered in blood. But
yeah, but then it quickly snaps to, they're all in the wash.
they're
all in laundry.
But but in the first instance, that's not how I kind of felt it had portrayed it. Like it was more of a deeper thing.
Yes. Yeah. Well, again,
it
goes to that. It goes to him trying to use that gallows humor, where it's a quick back and forth between, very hot, or as heartfelt as you're going to get in this novel, explanation as to why he's not wearing clothes, and then very quickly snap to someone trying to use an excuse to impress the higher up, basically.
Yeah, maybe I'm just not jaded enough for the book.
Maybe I'm too jaded.
What's the name of the character in MASH that's always dressing up like a woman?
I've never watched an episode of MASH, so I'm missing out. I feel I have heard good things, but
it wouldn't fly very well in the current political climate, I guess. But yeah, there's a character who wears drag all the time. And he wants to be considered crazy. It's an obvious ripoff of this. Like, wants to be considered crazy, but nobody takes it serious. Everyone just sort of laughs it off and doesn't think anything of it, really. He's always wearing his high heels.
I'm sorry, they're using drag to show mental deficiency. What
I know.
What kind of bigots are they?
I know.
I mean, my only MASH fact is that the guy who made it didn't want canned laughter, but the studio demanded it, and the compromise they came to that they wouldn't have canned laughter in the the theatre scenes where they were doing the operations.
That makes sense.
That was
it's the only
that's
time.
That's my one and only MASH fact.
But in MASH, they would get quite somber in those situations, but the rest of the time they were kind of
Well, we spoke
Exactly.
about it. We spoke about it earlier, but another good example of that is something like Blackadder Goes Forth.
Mhm.
Particularly the last episode, when they're going over
Yeah.
into no man's land. The sincerity comes from that disconnect that they have when they do have those very occasional heartfelt moments. It's used to try and up what could be just quite a typical scene in something that's more serious. But when it's a comedy, the contrast highlights things that are particularly morose.
Yeah, I recently watched From Here to Eternity as well, and that it felt it didn't have the kind of farcical element of Catch-22, but it felt very similar in its tone, like the futility of war and the generals who were just trying to kind of further their career, or just kind of they were obsessed. I mean, the general in From Here to Eternity is obsessed with the boxing team. And that's all he's really concerned about is the boxing team. So the whole thing felt very similar.
It feels like having a manager with too much power.
Mm-hmm.
So you have somebody who manages everything, but at the same time, maybe almost has power of life and death.
Yeah, you've got all these people surrounding him who are just worried about dying, and all he's obsessed with is the bomb patterns, or being famous at home for his mentions in the newspaper.
Yeah, and I do quite like the bomb patterns, because that in itself is just something that is being put out to keep people busy, because the problem is there's so many characters you can never remember who it bloody relates to. But is it Dreedle or Peckham who basically issues statements saying that bomb patterns need to be tighter, and that they're going to be keeping on top of people to make sure that they have tight bomb patterns. But it's a completely meaningless term, and it doesn't help anything. It's only being done so that it gives them something to do, because they can put out reports that say that they're either getting better or worse at bomb patterns. They can discipline people. It's just a way of keeping them busy, basically.
I mean, it also points out that the tighter the bomb pattern, the more of a target it makes for the Germans to hit as well. So it has a negative effect.
And a smaller area that you're actually going to be bombing, which, depending on what area what your target is, might be completely useless. You might want to cover more of an area. But right, what else have we got? The disappearance of Clevenger. We never actually find out what happens to him. He could have gone off with Orr, which we'll cover shortly, or he may have been shot down. There's quite a few things that at the end of the book are still left quite up in the air, like his liver condition, which is mentioned on page 1 and never actually addressed, unless it is a lie from the very beginning, because he is told to tell people about him having a painful liver if he wants to stay longer in hospital, because it's something that they're focusing on more. So it might just be that it's a complete lie from the start, but I don't know. I might have missed something that addressed that.
Another thing I noticed about the hospital is that they never see the same doctor twice, and it's actually turned to a point. And then the doctor says that, I'll see you tomorrow, and he doesn't return. It's another doctor. So there's this complete, the way they are treated, and if they switch beds, they become somebody else. It's also very insane. Like there's no rotation of bombardiers, but there's a huge rotation of doctors, except for the one doctor that doesn't want to go to the Pacific, Dr. Kanika, who quote unquote dies in the end.
Yeah, which particularly it's done particularly well in the film, that bit.
Yeah. Although it doesn't cover his wife, which I think is one of the best parts of the book.
It is, but the way everybody literally, from the instant it happens, like he's stood there while the plane crashes, and he's like, I'm supposed to be on that plane. And then from that point on, it's like he's invisible. Like everybody just starts to talk about him while next to him, but completely ignore him. It's like he's a ghost.
So the thing is, he's put on the flight log because he needs his flight hours, but he doesn't like flying. So it's this kind of thing where you break a rule in order to fulfill another rule. But what happens is the plane crashes. And since he's on that flight log, he's now officially dead, despite the fact that he's standing next to the guy who proclaims him dead. And people start ignoring him because, yeah, he's dead, so he has to be some kind of zombie, because according to the paperwork, he died. And that's not the first time it happens in the book, because there's another pilot which died but wasn't supposed to be there. So on the books, he's still alive. So his body, which they have, is just in Yossarian's tent on a bunk bed. And they can't move him out. He asked for his body to be removed, and it doesn't happen because the guy is still alive. So he's supposed to be there, according to the books.
But his literal body isn't there, is it, though?
Yeah. So I thought it was poorly written, because I think that it's metaphorically that he's there. I think it's just his belongings that are there, not his body, because I think his body went missing when it got bombed. When he got shot down, I don't think they recovered him. But it does initially make it sound like he's physically there, but I think it just refers to his belongings.
Yeah, because I never took it that way. I always took it.
I'm finding new
theoretically in the tent.
I'm finding new people come in. They basically throw the stuff out, and this greatly upsets Yossarian, because he basically
he doesn't like to do anything. He just likes to complain.
Yeah.
And the new people that come in are all full of life and vigor and youth and vitality, and he's not.
kind of reminds me a bit about It's All Quiet on the Western Front. In this movie, it starts out with all these kids that are full of vigor and they want to fight. And in the end, this one kid has survived all these ordeals and he goes back. And then he says to the next batch of kids, "Don't go, it's horrible." And these kids just say that he's a coward. And so...
Yeah, well, he's basically jaded because of what he's been through. So he looks at the fresh-faced new kids that have moved into the tent and sees what probably was in his group when they first moved into the tent. The problem is, to me, that falls a little bit flat on its face when you've got Yossarian being such a coward, because obviously he has been through some experiences that you don't really want to be a part of, but it's for a character that's so keen on getting out of it anyway. I don't know, it feels a bit disingenuous when he's looking at them like the war-torn soldier. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You heard of the White Ribbon campaign during World War I?
Yeah.
Where women would go around fixing white ribbons to men who hadn't signed up for whatever reason.
Go fight and die for us, men.
It would basically be like if you had the white ribbon tied around your wrist, and then were telling other people, "Oh, you don't want to go out there. You don't know what it's like." You've already been marked as a coward, so they're not going to listen to you. Even if he's got some points to make, and he's still. Everyone considers him crazy because he wants to get out of duty. So the fresh-faced kids aren't really going to pay attention to him.
And the other thing that struck me as well is when he's doing insane things like not wearing clothes, like the other characters interact with him. They ask him, "Oh, why aren't you wearing any clothes?" And then he explains, and they're like, "Oh, okay," and then just jump straight into the not back into normality. Like there's all this insanity going on, but everything kind of carries on. If you know what I mean.
The humor in it does feel. I mean, you think of the 60s, what was coming out, something like a Monty Python, that kind of this new wave of absurdist humor. This to me feels a little bit more modern, as in time period. It feels a little bit separate to that because it's not that kind of slapstick. It kind of feels more. It feels more Gen X because it's kind of that absurd situation. Yeah, it's that absurd situation, but we're dealing with it by being snarky. It feels a little bit more modern than 61 to me.
It feels like that. It feels very Jewish. That kind of Jewish kind of Californian Hollywood humor. I get what you mean. It's like a George Carlin skit or something. He's a little bit more. Yeah, or even
Mel Brooks
Woody Allen or any of it. Yeah. It's all that kind of. It's got a very distinct kind of humor to it.
If Mel Brooks had directed a Catch-22 film, it would have been amazing. Actually, thinking about it now, this as a script would work in that kind of environment. All right, what have we got? Just because I don't know if it comes up later on in the timeline, do you just want to cover what happens to the wife of the Doctor as well?
And she lives happily ever after.
Yeah. Well, basically, the Doctor, he wants to go back home because he had quite a nice life, but when he gets written off as dead, even though he's not dead, it massively benefits his wife in terms of pensions and payouts, and she gets paid off from his insurance policy, and various other institutions give her money because she's got a dead husband in the war, and it turns out that she's better off now he's dead, and but he's not really dead. But she just moves off and cuts ties, and he's left without his woman.
Yeah, and again, the reason she thinks he's dead, obviously, he's down on the report as being in that flight, but because Colonel Cathcart has agreed to send out letters of condolence to every family member when someone dies as a way of, putting himself in the public eye and being seen as, a respectable colonel. She gets a letter saying that he's dead. He then sends a letter to her saying that he's still alive, which then they, as a way of covering up their cock up, they follow it up with a letter saying, anyone trying to contact you that's saying that they're the Doctor, they're just pulling a prank on you, and you need to ignore them and listen to us because we're the military and we can never be wrong.
And I like the fact that the first letter that she gets, it's got all the boxes ticked. So it's like your son and or daughter has, and then it's like they should really have just left one of those things in, but the letter's written.
It's like a template
so generic.
It's like a template form that they haven't actually filled out.
It's literally the template that Colonel Cathcart dictates. Like, okay, and so Colonel Cathcart dictates it in a way that everybody should read it, like, oh, you should just fill in the one that's relevant, but he says your son and or husband and they just leave it in, and so they get a letter which reads like that, which is like receiving one of these recruiter letters on LinkedIn where they show that they can't do a proper mail merge, like dear string first name, that kind of thing.
Yeah, none of it specifically targeted.
Because the other recurring thing that keeps coming back in the story is with the forging of the names.
Yeah, Washington Irving, which again, because it's a bit, it crops up every now and again. I don't think it's on the actual timeline, so we may as well cover it now.
Because it is recurring throughout the entire thing, isn't it? Even right to the very end, it keeps popping up. Because they start coming after Yossarian as well, thinking he's been part of the forgery.
Because he has.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That is one of the longest through lines, this Washington Irving character, which again is like, look at the incompetence of the military. They can't figure out what's happening. Where, as a way of keeping the people occupied when they're in bed in the hospital, they have them going through any letters that are being sent out and censoring anything that's sensitive information. But as a way of keeping occupied, Yossarian starts just, either crossing off information that's completely acceptable to be released. It's not any kind of sensitive data, or he's crossing out names, or he's crossing out addresses. And at one stage, he says he crosses out everything apart from the they and a, and then it gets to a stage where the only thing he crosses out is the person it's addressed to, and then he puts the chaplain's name at the very bottom of the page, which kicks off an investigation. And the alias that he's putting all of these changes down as is Washington Irving, who, if I remember correct, he was an author and like a 19th century diplomat. He did Legend of Sleepy Hollow. It's a bit obscure, and I don't really know if there's any reason why he chose Washington Irving. But anyway, he uses that name, and so because he's been using that name, and then he later writes that it's the chaplain. They then start to believe it's the chaplain that's been censoring all these letters.
What makes it even worse is that Major. Major, is hard to keep count. Also starts doing this because he doesn't like his a name writing the word major that much. So he sees these letters from Washington Irving and he just starts using that as well and starts going on it. So orders are being sent out, military orders with this name Washington Irving, which then ties the chaplain to something which is really serious, like falsifying orders, and so this completely spirals out of hand for the chaplain.
Yeah, well, he works out, doesn't he, that if he signs it correctly, they just come back to him to re-sign later with changes. Whereas he realizes that if he puts this other name on them, then they don't come back. But that's actually because they've all been flagged and they're being investigated, which he doesn't realize.
But it does solve his problem of getting rid of them. So,
and there is a third person signing as Washington Irving, which is the chaplain's assistant.
that a-hole, yeah.
Oh, this is great. Corporal, what is his surname? Something it's not Whitcomb. Anyway, we'll come to him when we come to the character list. But
there is one more through line.
Yeah.
With the eye patch and the colonel with the eye patch.
Is that Major DeCoverley?
Yeah, Major DeCoverley.
Who is horribly miscast in the miniseries because it's
Hugh Laurie.
George Clooney.
It's Hugh Laurie.
Oh, it's Hugh Laurie, isn't it? Yes,
because George Clooney is Scheisskopf. Yeah, so I mean, Hugh Laurie is not an unapproachable-looking man. I think he's horribly miscast as that. But I mean, does anyone want to explain why his name contains a gap?
I wouldn't know why Major DeCoverley has a gap in it, to be honest.
No, I'm not quite sure.
I know he's so unapproachable that only, I think, one person actually interacts with him. Yes. And apart from that, when something happens, he just does his stuff, and so he's almost completely disconnected from the world.
Nope.
Yeah, no one wants to ask him.
First name basis.
Because is it Major DeCoverley? Is he the one that with the skeet who sets up the skeet shooting, or is it the horseshoe throwing?
He throws horseshoes.
He throws horseshoes, yeah.
Yeah, because there's a whole theme in the book about the passage of time, isn't there? Where the idea is that the longer they can make it feel like the day's lasting, the better. So, like, if you do something that feels like it takes forever, then you essentially use up more time somehow. But I'm not quite sure how that works. Surely,
that's Dunbar.
Time flies when you're having fun. That's basically it. So if you're not having fun, then the day will take longer, and it will take longer for you to go in the next mission.
Yeah. So everybody wants time to pass horribly, so they do stuff that they really don't like doing, like skeet shooting. Although I'd quite like skeet shooting. But, yeah.
And again, anyone listening, if it feels like we're bouncing around, it's because we are, and it's very difficult to to keep track of some of the amounts of people in this book.
Yeah, and then like I was saying, the guy with the eye patch, which character was that?
Wasn't that Major DeCoverley?
Yeah, so you learn about the fact that he's got an eye patch, and then it dips it back in and out of how he got his eye patch. So you like learn where the eye patch came from. He cuts a hole out of the blind. But yeah, I'm forgetting which character does that now. But yeah, and then you learn that he actually lost later on. Is it Yossarian who has a conversation with the 107-year-old man?
Yes, again, so it's another way that they drib jab information. We find out he's got an eye patch, but we don't know why. We find out later that the reason he has an eye patch is because he got hit in the eye with a flower, with a rose, I think it was.
Fired out of a gun. Yeah,
and then again after that, Nately is having a conversation with this old man who's the head of Bordello, basically, and we find out that he was the person that caused the accident or the incident.
And one of the other themes that bit brings on while we're there is the whole kind of it's the meek will inherit the earth kind of idea, isn't it? that the whole reason this guy's lived to 107 is because he just lets everything wash over him. He doesn't try for anything or strive for anything or fight for anything or believe in anything. He's literally just his sole purpose in life, a bit like Major really. His sole purpose in life is to just keep his head down and keep out the way.
Sounds like Yossarian's ideal in a way, right?
Yeah.
Well, Major's sole purpose in the book is to not be bothered.
You survive, that's it.
The difference between the old man and Major is that he will actively try and get out of the limelight, but with the old man, he will always go out in the street and shout to the hills how much he supports whatever regime is in charge, as a way of preserving himself. So yeah, he is basically Yossarian if Yossarian fully lived up to what he was espousing.
If Yossarian was Italian and not Armenian.
Yeah. Because the old guy, the motto of the old guy is it's better to live on your feet than die on your knees.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is not the way it's normally phrased. It's normally it's better to die on your feet and live on your knees.
Yeah, which I mean, it is a true saying, but it's not really any comparison. It doesn't really explore the idea of why you would say it's better to die on your feet than live on your knees. Because
for me, like there's been a lot of talk at the minute from certain YouTube channels that we all probably watch about how even under extreme conditions, most people are still just living their lives.
Yeah.
And it kind of echoes back to that most people are just living their life and not getting involved in these wars and in the politics. They're just getting on with it, which is the whole live on your feet thing.
Yeah, I think the old man, it could be fair to say that unless a system of government is particularly egregious and particularly invasive, the NPCs that would fit into the Pareto principle of the 80-20 split, that 80% will basically be happy as long as they can just live their lives, whatever system they're in. Be it an oppressive socialist system, as long as it doesn't go too far, or a fascist system, or if they're having America basically prop up their government and try and reforge it as a liberty-loving democracy. People will be happy as long as it doesn't affect them or their small circle, whatever they're in. And I think that old man represents that.
Yeah.
AA often cites the Václav Havel essay about the shopkeeper who puts up a little poster for the Communist Party. Nowadays they might put up a rainbow or whatever, whether it's an NHS rainbow or an LGBT rainbow or whatever.
Or a BLM fist.
Yeah, BLM fist. I noticed they've got their own emoticon now. Have you guys noticed?
No.
Please,
sure.
What's an emoticon?
I was bitching about BLM, and suddenly I noticed there was an emoticon, like a fist emoticon.
They're still oppressed. Don't worry, though.
I know.
Another point to raise whilst we're on this page is the soldier in white, just as it's it's when he's in the hospital.
Which again, the film greatly amused me with that as well. The idea that the soldier in white is basically a guy who's completely covered in plaster cast, so all you can see are the pits, the deep pits of his eyes, just black, and the same with his mouth. Or can you see his mouth? But yeah, basically nobody really knows whether the soldier in white's dead or alive because he can't speak for whatever reason.
Or even if there's anyone in there.
Yeah, or even if there is anyone, it might just be a hollow plaster cast. But the only way they know that he's alive is the fact that they keep having to change the bottle that's taking his waste away.
They do take his temperature, so
yeah,
and that's how the nurse killed him apparently. But that's the odd thing. So Yossarian says that the nurse killed him because she proclaimed him dead. So if she didn't look, then he would still be alive. That's the kind of logic that we're dealing with. So
yeah, it's Schrodinger's cat kind of thing going on, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think that again, that happens at the very beginning of the book, and that tries to set us up for what would be the logic of everyone going forwards, where even though she didn't do anything to kill him, because she was the person that read his temperature when he was dead, but the twisted logic leads to the conclusion that she declared him dead, therefore she caused him to die, or she is the reason he is now known to be dead, so she killed him in a way.
Yeah.
I hope they saw it out of his bandages intact before burying him.
Yeah, and then he later returns, but we never actually know whether or not it is him, because obviously it's someone that's completely casted in white, so there's no way of knowing whether or not it's him or not. And he's described as having shrunk a couple of inches, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and in the film, they literally take his bottle of urine and just stick his drinking tube straight into it, and stick the drinking tube straight into the other one. It's very bizarre.
Kind of feels like bureaucracy at some point.
Yeah, it's this system has been here and always has been here, so we'll continue it even if it's completely pointless. Which I mean, this is a bit of a detour, but to me, even though when it's phrased in this way, it does make sense for them to stop it if it's not doing anything. It makes me think of the Chesterton's defense, what would you call it? A thought experiment, I suppose, where if you stumble across a fence in the middle of a field, and it doesn't seem to be serving any purpose, the question is, what would you do with it? And the conservative mind, small c conservative, would leave it there because it may serve a function that they're not aware of. But the more liberal mind
get rid of it.
Will get rid of it because they don't see that it has any purpose, so they want to remove it. To me, this is a similar thought experiment where even though it may not appear to be doing anything, the book is kind of showing it as it's completely pointless. So they, look at it. They should stop doing this because it's not doing anything. But I understand what he's going for in trying to deconstruct a system, even if we don't fully understand it. So I do think they should carry on with it because I'm going to uphold the principle that we might not fully understand the situation.
And while we're on the soldier in white, one of the other characters in the hospital is the Texan, who's kind of like the only positive person in the room, but he's that positive and he's that upbeat that nobody can stand to talk to him. And
everybody was discharged from the hospital after that.
Yeah, well, it kind of implies that does Yossarian come up with the theory that the Texan's been deliberately put there to make sure that nobody wants to stay in the hospital longer than they have to?
It does sound like a Yossarian thing to say. Somebody did this on purpose to me, and I'm punished for it. But I don't know.
Because there's bits of this book that I feel like I'm imagining or making up or something.
It's like a fever dream.
Yeah.
Our house was a bomb site during World War II, and but the target was about 2 miles away. I often think about that. Apparently, that's pretty common. The target was Clapham Junction.
Well, I think where I've grown up, if they hit us instead of Clapham Junction, they really would have been off course.
Well, we're not supposed to dig up. We're not supposed to dig down too far here because we cross the farm. So I feel like I was targeted, but really late.
They should have tightened up their bomb.
They should have timed it better, yeah.
All right. Have we got anything else to cover on this page? I think that covers most of it.
Move on quick before we think of something else.
Yeah. Let's skip along. Okay.
Welcome to the side road stream where we actually don't talk about the book, but about anything else we can think of.
I think we've been pretty on point.
As on point as you can be. I mean, like most of the time, I try and dress it up. I try and put some pictures on. I try and have a little bit of fun with it. But I thought, no, This
No.
one, cold hard. This is the timeline. No messing about. What have we got on here? So the mission to Bologna is probably let's probably start there. I don't think anything above that.
Because that's the other thread, isn't it? That's running through it. This mission that nobody really wants to fly.
Yeah, so that's when he moves the there's a map. Yeah, there's a map that shows where they're going to be. Where the line is. Where, sorry, I'm butchering this a bit. I'm trying to remember
The
exactly
battle
what
line,
it was.
probably.
Yes, it's basically what they have a map and they have a battle line on it, but it's not drawn on it. It's, something's been laid over it to show the battle line.
Probably a piece of cord.
It's a piece of ribbon. It's a piece of ribbon, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Something's been laid across it to show the battle line.
Certainly is in the film.
But it gets moved so that he can cancel the mission, so that Yossarian can get the mission cancelled, because the line is then in an area that they it looks as if it looks as if they've taken over where they're about to attack.
And this causes Major Coverly to immediately leave and do his stuff, because as soon as a town is liberated, he will drive in. Yeah. He's one of the most interesting characters, because he does basically nothing, but he's feared by the men, or he's unapproachable, so no one really questions the fact that he's not doing anything. Which makes him probably the most sane, because he doesn't do anything.
Yes, according to Yossarian, especially.
He throws his horseshoes. Yeah.
The other thing, obviously, as it says there on that mission, is that Orr gets shot down. So let's go into Orr a little bit more.
Orr's probably my favourite character.
Yes. Yeah. And actually, just thinking about his name now, going along the line of stupid names that show something to do with their character. I mean, Orr does make sense, considering he paddles his way over to Sweden. So maybe that's what they're going for.
Without his crab apples.
Yes. So with Orr, he is someone that is notorious for getting shot down during any mission. Any and all missions that he's been on, he's been shot down and has in some way got back to the base or been collected whilst surviving in the water. Initially, it's given the impression that it's because he's a very bad pilot. But we find out the big conclusion at the very end of the book is that he has been playing a fool the entire time, got shot down intentionally every time to practice being shot down. And then when he felt that, he had practiced enough, or the timing was right, whatever it may be, he then, sorry, I think that was a Discord noise then. He then, makes his way over to Sweden so that he can escape the war.
Yeah, he has to tread water for a while as well, doesn't he? Which I think does that give him the idea initially?
Well, it's hard to know whether or not he from day one had this in mind or not, but I think that's what it's going for, is that he from day one was trying to get shot down so that he could practice to escape.
But he's he's the ultimate kind of unassuming character as well, isn't he? He's always chuckling to himself.
Yes, and one of the
like a funny giggle type thing.
Yeah, and there's lots of little things that once you've read it, you can go back and think, oh, that's what, So he tries on several occasions to get Yossarian to fly with him, and we can kind of insinuate that it's because he wants Yossarian to come with him. Milo doesn't trust Orr, and I think it might be because Milo is a particularly good liar, and maybe he sees something similar in Orr, that he's not trustworthy for one reason or another. And yes, the situation that he has with his whore, I still don't quite understand why he paid. He paid a prostitute to hit him over the head
with a shoe.
For some reason, and I still can't figure out what that reason's meant to be.
Well, he's trying to get out of it originally, isn't he? He doesn't want to fly any missions, but he's pretending like he does want to fly the missions. And his first attempt to get out of the missions is getting his whore to hit him over the head with the shoe.
So was that him trying to get like hospitalized because she was hitting him over the head? You think?
I mean, that's how I understood it, but I might be wrong.
Well, he just wanted to get a concussion so he could escape the military. That was his plan at the time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but the idea
okay.
is that he's not doing what Yossarian's doing and quite obviously trying to get out of it. He's being more subtle than that.
He's
kind
always
of like
unassuming.
He's very unassuming. Yeah.
He doesn't fight the system verbally like Yossarian. Yossarian tries to reason himself out of the, while Orr is trying to sneakily manipulate the system without the system noticing it.
Yeah, he sees that everyone else is working within the confines of the system but manipulating it, and he does exactly the same. As opposed to Yossarian, who will just try and work against it, but because he's on his own and no one else really listens to him, it's completely ineffectual. He's just shouting into the wind.
Yeah, I mean, it's just another one of these books that we've read now where the main protagonist is pretty annoying.
Yes, well, maybe that says something about the types of books that I read. Although that being said, I had it. This was the first time I ever read this, so you can't blame that one on me. I just saw it on the shelf and thought we better get it out of the way.
Well, it's obviously a very highly rated book.
It is. Do we still think Yossarian is Assyrian just because it sounds funny?
Yep.
Yes.
And then also because maybe just that he's he's a bit of an outsider. That would have been a very uncommon name at that time in America.
It does make reference to that, doesn't it, a few times?
Yes. Yeah. We find out apparently in the sequel, Closing Time, that he is Armenian, but I think that he just did it for the rhyme.
The laughs.
Yeah. Which again, there's this weird disconnect with some of the humor where some of the stuff is genuinely quite entertaining. I think, like I say, I think the Clevenger, the trial and his kind of dressing down and the asking to read back the last line, that whole section to me works very well. Actually, not when I read it, because when you're in a bad mindset with a book, you can take. Even if you're enjoying parts of it, it can read poorly because you're just getting frustrated with it. But I did actually go back and listen to it as an audiobook, which I don't really usually do. But with this one, because it's got so much in it, I wanted to make sure I went back. And the audiobook was actually very well done. The guy that narrated it was fantastic. And a
single reader.
Yeah, single reader.
Yeah, there's lots of different voices, and it works really well.
Yeah, and I don't know if you noticed as well, to me it felt like a lot of the higher ups he was doing presidential voices for. Like he felt like he was doing like a JFK voice for one person, a Clinton voice for, I think it was Colonel Korn. Like I don't know if that was intentional, but it just came across like he was trying to put some kind of political spin on it when it comes to putting in presidential voices. But
one of the other characters that I enjoyed was the Native American.
Yeah.
And the 2 or 3 points surrounding his character, when he kept talking about his family back in America, that wherever they lived, the oil companies would find oil. So eventually they all just started to follow them round, and wherever they pitched a tent, that they would just immediately kick them out and dig for oil in that spot because they knew they would find it.
The human divining rods or something.
Yeah.
Yes.
Somebody is scared that he's going to sneak up and slit his throat from ear to ear, possibly because he constantly threatened to sneak up and slit his throat from ear to ear.
Yeah, and he's also determined that he's going to die of pneumonia.
Yes, which he later does. His best line, I can't repeat verbatim, but it's something to the effect that he dislikes the amount of bigotry because so many people put him in the same category as
these other people.
Yeah, as these other people, these unflattering names for these other people. All right, what else have we got? I think that's most of it covered. Kid Sampson on this slide that we'll cover as well. So we mentioned him before, but his death is essentially that McWatt constantly is flying low to annoy Yossarian. I don't think there's any other real reason behind it. It's
just
to bug
wants
him.
to scare him, doesn't he?
Yeah. And he does it at the beach. He flies too low, and Kid Samson is in the sea. And then very quickly, half of Kid Samson is quite literally in the sea because he gets 7 and 2, and his top half, is pureed and flown into the ocean, and his legs are still standing upright and causes a commotion. And this is, like I say, that kind of, to me, it felt like he was trying to say, it's a funny situation because it's so extreme, but also you should not feel like you should laugh at it. That was the impression I got.
And it is the idea that the legs left there as well, isn't it? I can't quite remember why.
Yeah, the legs are still poking up, and then they do eventually fall over.
Yeah, because he has visions, doesn't he? He has nightmares about it, doesn't he? Yossarian.
Okay, move on to the last of the timeline slides. So his new roommates we've already spoken about. Nately, I suppose now is the time that we can talk about Nately. So he's 19, if I remember correctly. Comes from old money, and he gets put into the puts through the military as a way of trying to. I've completely forgotten the name of the process they go through to get in as a pilot. But he gets put through that process because it's a long process, and they believe that the war's shortly going to be over. And it's exactly the same reason that Yossarian joins that route, because he wants to spend as much time as he can in training, because everyone thinks that the war's shortly going to be over. But obviously it's not, so he has to fly missions. And whilst flying missions, he comes across a whore in Italy and falls madly in love with her for some reason. And he eventually gets shot down because he is actively trying to fly more missions so that he can stay in Italy, so he can spend more time with this prostitute.
Did she fall in love with him just before he gets shot down, finally?
Well, this is the question. What I don't understand why she flips so quickly. I understand that he helps her.
He's about to die, that's why.
Well, yeah, he helps her not exactly escape because they're not really holding her captive, but they're trying to hold her captive, but because she doesn't really mind being there, they can't hold her captive. So he helps her get out of that situation that she's in, and then she is said to have fallen in love with her, but then he is trying to treat her like essentially a wife. And then she instantly, from her behavior, switches back to being uninterested again. So I don't really understand why this whore, who was only ever referred to as Nately's whore, why she goes on this rampage to try and take her revenge against Yossarian.
And it's a real vendetta. Like
a globe-trotting vendetta.
Yeah. Doesn't matter where Yossarian goes, she's already there waiting for him to stab him.
It's the most farcical part of the whole book, probably.
I think it's almost like an idea of an Italian, like a wild Italian who's got a vendetta.
Yeah, could well be. Italian women, I've heard, can hold grudges. So yeah, maybe it's that. Nothing really else there. Yeah, I think everything else we can just cover in the character portraits, I suppose. But as we spoke about Nately's whore, Yossarian basically tells her that Nately is dead, and after that she has this vendetta against him. When he finally thinks he's safe, she is dressed up in military garb and salutes to him. He salutes, and whilst his arm is still raised up in the air, she manages to get a knife in his ribs.
Potato.
Right. Okay. Let's move on to the characters and try our best to remember half of them. So some of them we would have already covered. Are there any other general plot points that you wanted to raise before we go through the characters? I think most of the the through lines we've kind of gone into already.
Who was the one the part with the whore that gets killed?
Yeah, so we'll talk about her. I've got her down as a character, so we'll talk about her then. But I don't think anything like the horse chestnuts. I suppose we could cover. There's not really anything to say. I think this is probably what turned me against it so quickly. It felt like if Samuel Beckett had written this, he would look at it and think, God, that's meaningless. Like it's so frustrating. It's intentional, and I understand that, but
it goes on for a long time.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean it's enjoyable to read. Just because something's intentional, and I can appreciate the fact that they put it in there for a reason, doesn't mean I like it. But essentially, Orr says to Yossarian as a child, he used to walk around with crab apples in his mouth, and it just goes on for a long time, and we never find out why.
So what, apple cheeks?
Yes.
Yeah. Why would you want apple cheeks? We don't know.
Yes, exactly.
But he only puts apples in there because they're not as because he couldn't find any is it walnuts?
Horse chestnuts.
Charles chestnuts, that's it.
I think Freelance might have actually shot himself because of this discussion. I've not heard from him in a while.
No! I'm just listening to you. I'm just seeing how long this can last. So I groomed the dog in the meantime. So
I'm glad you kept yourself occupied with something interesting.
No, the whole thing is the story. For anybody who's listening, please. We are so fragmented because the story is fragmented like that. And just remember, we read these books so you don't have to.
Yes, or in some cases we read them so that we can advise that you do.
Yeah,
but all those people can't be wrong. Maybe we're wrong.
So exactly. We're discussing Catch-22. Please read another book. Yeah,
we're discussing Catch-22. Go read Lord of the Flies.
Yeah,
that's my review in a nutshell. So, right, let's go through these characters. If there's anything that people want to talk about with them. Anyone on here that you want to pull out, or do you want me to list them out and see if there's any points to be made?
Well, my favorite is still what is a lieutenant, then colonel, then general, then lieutenant general, Shaiskov, who basically wants to march people around. That's his whole thing. He's hated by other people because he's promoted past them. He's not made a general, but a lieutenant general. So he's the boss of the other generals. But the only thing he does is march people around. He doesn't have any competence at all. And that's also why everybody hates him. And that's why probably they gave him the name Shaiskov, because he probably has some other German name which sounds like that. So, and
it's like your dog.
Yeah, the beeping. Hang on.
No, it's bringing levity to the situation.
Yeah, we interrupted you chewing on your chew toy. Yes, yeah.
And it's also the whole. It's like the whole futility of the war summed up in just marching around for the sake of it.
Yes, yeah, and all of his priorities are on the march and earning is it a baton, I believe, or some kind of signifier that they've won the march and have been the most successful at marching. But he doesn't put any thought into actually military tactic or anything to the actual war effort. It's all just for the sake of marching.
And then when he gets sent to where Yossarian is, he's not allowed to do the marching anymore. But he comes to the agreement that he can advertise the marching
and then cancel it.
And then cancel it, but he has to cancel it. So it's never going to exist. But the very fact that he can organise the marching just to cancel it keeps him happy.
Yes, because it's, again, going back to bureaucracy as one of the main themes, it's a way of doubling your workload if you can announce something and then later release a press release as to why it had to be cancelled. You've filled the job role of several people there because Again, the same as the tight bomb patterns. Even if it's completely pointless and it's all it is red tape, there are positions that you can then create or that you can fill because they're just doing this red tape. And again, it goes to Heller's kind of view of the military, and in some ways as this kind of hierarchy as a whole, where you have got this bureaucratic system that's there to just self-perpetuate, which is true. But again, the angle of the critique in this book is from a particular angle of, I would say it's like quite a Marxist angle that he comes at, and even if the criticism is correct, I think he doesn't really offer a solution. And if he does, if Yossarian is his solution, I'd rather have the bureaucracy. Thank you.
Yeah, the Marxist angle is that there should be like just one worldwide communist government, and that somehow this would mean there would be no war, right? No military. So it's kind of a critique of nationalism. But,
yeah. Or that, this bureaucracy is bad, but once we put our bureaucracy in there, then we'll be okay.
And brilliant. So it's not even, yeah. So you could imagine a critique of the bureaucracy of the military that might leave a space for a better or more virtuous military. But I'm not sure that's what. Yeah,
exactly. There's nothing immaterial about his worldview when it comes to the military. He views it all as, the military industrial complex earning money through this, which, like I say, some of the criticisms that he makes are accurate. But
that's also why it's more a critique of the Vietnam War than the Second World War.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, it definitely applies to everything post World War II a lot more than it probably did about World War II itself.
61. I mean, Vietnam was just like the French were in Vietnam, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I don't
think maybe
that
type of war. Then.
Yeah, maybe Korean War more, but
maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know what the reporting was on the Korean War, but I know that the Vietnam War, you had all these. It was a lot more televised.
It swiftly became, much criticized and everything. But I think at this stage, it probably would have been more the Korean War that he had in mind.
Presumably, all wars would be that heavily criticized if there'd been the same number of cameras.
Yeah. That's right. Well,
I mean, they would be, but they'd be less accurate. They might be faced with the same criticism, but it doesn't mean that they would be closer to the truth.
And the other,
would you? I mean, something like the Boer War, would that be the military? I mean, maybe it would, but I don't. The French.
We know how one terrible photograph can sort of, ruin a whole war, basically, for people, right?
Yeah, even if it's completely. Completely edited, completely cut. Just cut that person out of the frame and post that. And anyway.
So the other backstory I quite enjoyed was Cargill's, with his advertising company that was so awful. People would deliberately hire him just to tank a product or a company.
Yeah, I think he's only mentioned the once, but his backstory is one of the most entertaining. What else have we got there? We covered Scheisskopf and Cavalli. Danby. Is there anything to say on Danby? He is. He's at the very end of the book alongside the chaplain with Yossarian. Real memorable character.
Yeah. Because by that point, you.
Yeah.
But Yossarian's essentially he's being interrogated, isn't he? By the end.
Yeah, so it's after he's been stabbed that Yossarian's telling Danby his plans to escape to Sweden. There is actually, just looking through my notes here, there is something on Major that I wanted to mention as well. Is that his father in the book is described as being a rugged individualist, and I just there's a phrase that's thrown around now as quite a condescension towards that kind of Ayn Randian objectivist libertarian, and I wonder if this is its origin. I just chuckled when I saw that it had been written down in this book. Yeah.
For the people that don't know, major became a major because the IBM system couldn't handle somebody called major not being a major. So it resolved it by making a major, which complicated everything. Because immediately he was during training, he became his trainer's superiors. And immediately he shoved into a major role where he has actually nothing to do with it. Actually, he didn't want to be a major. He was actually quite normal until people figured out he was a major. And,
well, he wasn't normal because he had a resemblance to Henry Fonda that for some reason affected his life from an early age. In a negative manner.
He basically wants to just fit into the background, doesn't he? But once he's made a major, he can't do anymore.
Well, at the beginning, his mother thought he had a different name, but as soon as he finds out his name is Major, he's also cast out by all his the other kids at his school, so he's always alone. So he basically doesn't want to have to do with anything with anybody, and then he's thrust into the situation.
Yeah.
So they also try to promote him and demote him at some point, but they also fail because then major wouldn't be a major, which doesn't make any sense. So it's one of these silly things that kind of makes sense in an insane world. But
where does the fourth major come in?
Well, his surname is also Major.
Yeah.
His middle name is Major as well.
Yeah, and his first name is Major as well.
Yeah. So he's Major, but then he obviously gets promoted.
They make him a major. Okay. I don't remember.
Which in both the miniseries and the film, it's Colonel Cathcart that does it because he's just he can't be bothered to talk to someone that's called Major that isn't a major. But I do think it works better as that kind of again that bureaucratic system where because the machine spits out that Major is a major, everyone just follows it along because it's easier to follow it than it is to question why he's been promoted.
It's one of those bureaucratic errors.
Yeah. And his dad just basically names him that because he's a dick.
Yes.
Yeah, he's Chad. What are you talking about?
Against his mother's wishes.
Well, when your dad named you Quack, then you also.
Yes. How would you feel if your father called you House?
Yeah.
Living your life as House.
No, I changed it when I had my species transformation.
Okay. So you're one of the trans species type. Okay. Anywho.
Oh, that's why you've got Duckling House. Anyway, right. Anyway.
As a rubber duck.
General Dreedle and Moodus might be worth discussion out of the list. So Dreedle is obviously the general, and he is the father-in-law of Moodus. And Dreedle is constantly with a supposed nurse, but she never actually acts as a nurse. And the only reason he gets her to follow him around is because she's particularly attractive, and he is trying to catch out his son-in-law sleeping with her or trying it on with her as a way of kicking him out of the military. Because the only reason it goes to this promotion through nepotism or through incompetency. The only reason he's at high rank in the military is because General Dreedle is his father-in-law.
So Dreedle is happy that Moodus is hit in the face by Chief. I forgot his name.
White Half-Oats.
Yeah, a White Half-Oats. Yeah. And so immediately White Half-Oats is in the favor with the general. So, oh God.
Yes, I know. This is why I suffered. This is why I began to hate the book so much.
Let's do an easy one. Let's do War and Peace next time. It only has 250 characters. Much easier.
I mean, it's even more. It's even worse than like Game of Thrones, isn't it? I mean, that was. People say that's got a lot of characters.
I don't want to admit how much time I put into making this, and that. Yes, I the insanity started to come out of the book and into my head throughout the production of this slide. And we've probably covered most of the important ones already, to be fair. But if there's anyone else that we want to cover.
I feel like Havermeyer's mentioned quite a lot in Hungry Joe.
Yeah, I feel like Havermeyer's mentioned a lot, but I still, nothing retains in my head about him the entire time. There's a few characters where they're involved in situations that other characters are involved in, but just I don't know. Maybe it's me, or maybe it's just the way it's written. Where someone like a Havermeyer, I feel like at the end of the novel, I still know nothing about him, apart from the fact that he shoots rats.
Yeah,
it's also quite hard to figure out who's Yossarian is obviously the main character, but it's not like that another character takes up another 25% of the book. It's all really sprinkled about, and you get these whole stories about what for 5-6 people are involved with just a tomato, and what you. This is also a bit of tangent again, but in the end of the book, you have Yossarian, where he basically is attacked by Nately's whore, and he's praised as a hero because he stopped a Nazi assassin. But at the same time, there's also a report that says completely the opposite, that he's a coward. So they can pick whatever report they want. And this also happens with the tomato that the chaplain gets, that where where Corporal Whitcomb, his assistant, basically says, "Where did you get that?" The tomato, and then they can twist the story whatever way they want, so they can just accuse anybody and have these show trials. So it's just that the people in this organization are completely at the whim of their superiors. There's just no justice in it.
So just on the left hand side, I think two that we haven't covered there. Yeah, as you say, Hungry Joe and Arfie, we haven't really covered either.
Arfie's got the other main plot. Well, not another plot, but he's got the other kind of standout thing that happens with him, I guess.
Yeah, I think he's one of the biggest assholes in the book.
Yeah, he's the one who kills the prostitute, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, I think that he's there to try and show how twisted someone's principles can be when it comes to murder. Again, it's going on that anti-war sentiment where he, looking at it through the perspective of Hela, Arfie is obviously constantly either bombing areas or shooting down enemy planes or whatever it may be. So there's plenty of murder from the American side when they're flying, but he's like completely desensitized to it. So he feels it's a principled position to never have to pay for a prostitute. So, which is perfectly fair position. But he then, as a way of as maintaining his principles, but still sleeping with someone, he then rapes I think she's a maid, or just like someone that's hanging around the soldiers, and then throws her out a window and kills her. So it's a way of saying, look at how twisted our perspective of life is. He is so happy at maintaining his morals because he's saying that he's never going to pay for sex, but it still fits in his morality that he can then rape someone and kill them because he hasn't paid them for sex.
Well, I kind of got the feeling that he'd gone mad at that point.
Yeah, I
Who hasn't?
I was quite disturbed by that the first time I read it as a kid.
Yeah, I felt quite dismayed because Arfie, I thought, was a bit of a Chad up until that point.
Yeah, like I say, I got more the impression that the whole situation of the war and the killing had just made him go insane. Like that was he'd broken essentially, and yeah, I don't know, that's the way I felt.
Twisted logic.
Yeah.
Well, no, just the the whole because it's at that stage where Yossarian's wandering through Rome as well, isn't it? And everything's just completely gone to pot. Everything's upside down, gone crazy.
Yeah, so that I believe it's chapter 39, and it's called The Eternal City. and that whole section is very just look at the Italian streets, war is hell. There's not
people
really
hitting
much
things for no reason.
Yeah, there's not really much substance to it, but I feel like that's meant to be the driving it home point where we look at what war leads to. But if you're not following it along up until that point, you don't. The impact isn't there.
But it's almost like it's Yossarian's hell. Like it could almost be like Yossarian's died and the plane never really landed, and this is his hell. If it had just kind of stopped there, you could
or as they do in the 1970 film, which I think works very well. It's all kind of shown as being a fever dream of him being in hospital from the stabbing.
Yeah, because it starts with him getting stabbed in the film, doesn't it?
Yeah, which I think that works very well. And so that, as you say, if that was shown just leading up to him getting out of hospital, it could be that all of that was a fever dream, and that was, as you say, kind of his hell. But it's not how it's written. And the other thing that doesn't really work about that section for me is that, again, multiple times whilst walking through that street and seeing it as being hell on earth, he sees opportunities to help out and he just doesn't take them. And so, again, it's like, well, how am I meant to sympathize with this character or feel that he's going through a personal hell if he's just there's a situation where he sees like a woman about to attack another woman and he feels that he is able to prevent it if she calls out. Well, just go and help out. Why are you waiting for her to call out? And
there's the dog being beaten and the child being beaten. Or was it a donkey?
He's a character that constantly is looking for a way out of withholding of maintaining any kind of principle, but will attack everyone else that has any kind of principles for not living up to them. At least they're trying. Some of them anyway.
I mean, there's a few characters in it whose sole purpose for living is to not be bothered by anything.
And anyone who does seem to have some sort of old-fashioned principle is just kind of dismissed as a fool.
I mean, the only character who's achieved it is the 107-year-old man.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is why I say it feels more Gen X than it should do in 61, because doing nothing and sitting back and being sarcastic about it is like Gen X to a T. What's the character that's always used in reference to it by Agent in his videos? The girl that was on that cartoon in the 90s. What is her name?
Daria.
Daria.
Yeah, Daria. Yeah.
Daria.
Yossarian could be her.
There's no point doing anything.
Yeah. Hungry Joe. I actually feel like Hungry Joe is one of the most sympathetic characters in the book. And again, his death is... he's the person that's flown the most missions and is constant, and the only person that's ever happy to have the missions increased because, well, I'm not really sure why, because that is like his he knows that he's never going to get out. So once he has it confirmed, then maybe it's the removal of the hope that keeps him happy. But he doesn't die by getting shot down like basically everyone else does. He dies because he suffocates by having a cat on his face. So again, it's kind of that. It's sad, but you shouldn't be laughing at it because it's sad. It's Hella trying to put some gallows humor in there.
Yeah, because you've got Chief White half up, who also, he kind of the things that he says and does, indicate towards his death, eventual death. So you've got the cat hater. They got the cat hater who gets killed by the cat sleeping on his face, and then you've got Chief White tells everybody he's going to die of pneumonia, and then he does. Yeah.
I got Captain Black on there as well, who again is another person that by the end of the book, the name was in my head, but I couldn't remember anything to do with him. But he was the person that's trying to get promotion, but Major got it because of his name, and because of that, he then started putting in what would be, at the time be considered this kind of McCarthyist oath to America that everyone must sign before they do anything. But he is refusing Major the ability to sign them because the logic is, and it goes back to that, look at how twisted the logic is that we find in everything in the book. Why would I let Major sign an oath if I know that he's a traitor, and then I'm using the evidence of him not signing it as a way of showing that he is a communist sympathizer? Other than that, there's not really much to say about Captain Black. Flume, who we spoke about with Half Oat. He gets threatened to have his throat slit, and then runs off into the forest because he believes that's going to happen. I think that's... Is there anything else we want to talk about with the chaplain? Or with Wintergreen?
The chaplain's got like quite a normal life, hasn't he, really? He's back home. He's one of the few... Well, he's quite a normal guy, but he's there for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah, there is this running thing when it comes to anyone in positions of... with the chaplain, with the psychiatrist whose name escapes, I think it's Henderson or something like that, Sanderson, and with the doctor, he tries to put in this hypocrisy again of anyone in positions of power, where the doctor is constantly neurotic, and the Hippocratic Oath means nothing to him because he feels like he's the most important person and that he's going to die soon. So why should he care about anyone else? With the chaplain, he's obviously an Anabaptist preacher, or whatever his title would be, chaplain, obviously. But he's basically, for a lot of it, he's lost his faith. He's never non-religious, but he's questioning his faith a lot, and he's very timid, so he's not really able to lead. So there's a hypocrisy of what a chaplain should be. And the psychiatrist is someone that constantly pathologizes himself and tells everyone his problems by pathologizing himself, but doesn't really give much thought to those around him. So it's this sort of everyone that has a role that they should be fulfilling in society never meets it. So we should tear it down.
Yeah.
Or do nothing like Usarian does.
Yeah, it's very nihilistic, isn't it? The whole thing, really.
Yeah.
He's the character who calls everyone phonies. The book about the teenager who's like...
Catcher in the Rye? That's
yeah, it's a bit like that. It's a bit...
Holden Caulfield.
Holden Caulfield. It's a bit like that, like a bunch of phonies kind of thing.
I don't know if I agreed with the whole tearing down thing, because what you have here is a design system. So this whole military, every role in it is designed and people are put into it. And then it shows that people act out of their self-interest. And then the system doesn't work. So that actually proves that the design system wouldn't work. So if you would just everybody do what they're good at, like Milo Binder, you suddenly see that they are really productive. So this would actually could be seen as a critique against having a designed, planned system.
Well, Milo's shown as being effective, but he's not shown as being moral, because he's willing to sell out anyone to anyone else that will pay the price.
Sure.
So maybe, like I say, maybe the answer, there is no answer, and we should just be like Usarian and do nothing. But
okay,
all these people,
Milo,
like there are some career soldiers, right, and then a bunch of other people who would be doing other things normally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the conscripted men are treated differently as well, aren't they?
Yeah.
It makes reference to that quite a lot.
Yeah, which is not to be unexpected. Okay, I feel like
move on quick. Yeah,
that's all that we can get. Running out of gas on the list now. Almost there. A couple of people that we've already spoken about.
Oh yeah, Luciana is a good description of her. Yeah, that's. And then
Thank
then the answer is I don't want to sleep with you.
Yes.
And then she says, yeah you do.
Yeah, I mean, maybe she might be one of the better characters as well. So maybe the feminist angle couldn't critique it
I
as
think
harshly as we could.
She kind of represents Yossarian's fact that he doesn't really know what he wants until he doesn't have it anymore.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
she marries a doctor, doesn't she?
And Yossarian has the same thing with Orr. He really hates Orr until Orr is gone, then he suddenly loves Orr. And it's the same pattern. So it tells more about Yossarian than about her.
Yeah, the word love is obviously thrown about a lot. Basically, every woman he encounters, he says he falls in love with. And the only one that he doesn't is the lady, the maid with green, whatever her name is. We'll come to her shortly.
She's the one that's thrown out of the window by Arfi, right?
No. This is the other one that will sleep with literally anyone that approaches her. And the reason
so many of them.
wait until the next page.
No.
Yeah. So the reason he falls in love, he doesn't fall in love with her, is because he knows that he can always have her because she'll open her legs for anyone. So yeah, it's kind of this. Any woman that doesn't want him, he falls in love with. It goes back to he doesn't know what he wants, but he knows that if he can't have it, he wants it, which is a very childish mindset.
Yeah, I thought it was done particularly well in the film. The bit with the which colonel is it? His buxom wife or whatever she is, and they all start mourning.
Yeah, so that's General Dreedle with the nurse or supposed nurse. Yeah, we didn't even talk about the moaning. Oh god, let's skip over the moaning. Let's not drag back into that. Who else we got? The old man we've spoken about already. I think I'll move on. You make your point, and I'll move on to the final slide.
Watch the film for the best interpretation of the moaning scene.
Oh. Can you see why I was losing my mind?
There's a lot in it. It's a long book.
Yeah, I got a word count up just to compare. And
let's do War and Peace. It's about sad Russians in the snow. It's really easy.
It was just shy of 175,000 words. When I think previously the longest book that we had covered was Frankenstein, which I think was around 74,000. So
yeah,
it's pretty dense.
I think I prefer this to Frankenstein. I'm going to go out on a limb.
When we at the end of the year have a little roundup of the books that we cover, and we'll fight out which wins the yearly cup. I will fight you to the ends of the earth on that because I completely disagree. But yeah, I don't want to rip into this too much. It has some merit, but I do think this is the worst book that we've covered in ranking. But again,
somehow
this is
very, very popular somehow. Yeah.
It is good competition. You know, it's not like we're dealing with poor literature here, but I think that this is the worst book that we've covered.
Shyskov's wife is a nice one because she basically sleeps with everybody to piss him off.
Yeah.
Yes, and Dory Dews just above there again is another example of someone that Yossarian claims to fall in love with because she'll sleep with anyone, but only once as a way of kind of keeping them interesting, I think. Just crack out any other ones that we've got here. Dreedle's girl is again that nurse. The CID men we've covered. Lieutenant Coombs is the underling of the chaplain, who's the atheist, who thinks he'll be a better preacher. I think, if I remember correctly, that's his name. Michaela is the girl that's thrown from the window.
To be honest, half of this list feels like people from primary school. You know their names, but you can't really remember. There's no face associated with it. It's just a blank space. Like right.
Here's one that is worth talking about. Actually, Giuseppe is the soldier who sees everything twice. So there's a section when he's hospitalized. There's a soldier that says he sees everything twice. Yossarian then follows that and says that he sees everything twice because he sees that such a commotion is being made over it, and they're looking after him so much. And he's like, oh, this guy obviously knows what he's doing to get out of active service. The next day, the person dies, and so Yossarian is asked to imitate being him because his family have just come over, and the doctor wants them to have not wasted their journey. So he says to Yossarian, well, if you talk to them and pretend to be their dying son, it's better than them having come here and not being able to speak to their son before he dies.
That is a very surrealistic scene when the father and the brother of Giuseppe are trying to convince the mother that his name is actually not Giuseppe but Yossarian, because Yossarian says his name is Yossarian, but they still are convinced that that's his son. It's like the bureaucratic shenanigans you had with major, but then in real life, and these people are just going along with it, which almost makes you feel like maybe they are imposters as well, that they are actually not their parents, but they're coming anyways because they've been shipped, and then they're pretending to visitors, and that's something like that.
Yeah, it could be something for Colonel Cathcart to again look good by having families come in.
Just get some KPI up, some key point index. And then
there's some. Carry on.
And then just get the numbers up, and it looks good on paper and in the reports, and then hopefully some journalists will pick it up, and then Colonel Cathcart will become famous, and then he will get into General Peckham's eyes, and then he will get promoted. Right? Mm-hmm. That's the plan.
Yeah. The person that would sleep with everyone I've just seen is the maid with lime-coloured panties. Is her name? So, it could well be that, or it could be the more surreal. They're just following orders, just like everyone else. So when they're shown, this is actually your son, they just follow along with it because they're just following orders. It's again that kind of it's easier to not question it and just go along with it. Same with the promotion of Major. So many other aspects of the book. I feel like, again, several times in my notes I've just written "please stop," where the point has been made and it just didn't need to keep on going. I think it would work better as a more condensed book.
Yeah, I mean, there's one of the other themes in it that is there quite a lot. It's people who are dead who aren't dead, and people who aren't dead who are dead.
Yeah, but they only because the bureaucratic system.
Just because of bureaucracy. Yeah. So there's the guy in the tent. There's the doctor. There's there's the couple that come to see the boy, and the boy. There's a lot of it.
He's good at coming up with a lot of variations on a theme, but it is repetitive.
Yeah.
Well, that
next.
Let's just go on to the themes, which again we've covered most of these.
Are you sure you put black humor on there?
Well, I just wanted to drive the point home, apparently.
Okay.
The sexuality in the book is quite OTT in places.
Yeah, so is the black humor, and the black humor. Both of those themes are quite present in it. Yeah, the sex goes a little bit over the top sometimes. Yeah.
Look, if this was the world in during the Second World War, I'm starting to understand the feminists, but I don't experience it right now like it is like this, and I almost get the idea that some of these people are stuck with the idea that this is actually the way the world is, where men can just grab anybody by anything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, well, there's the assault on Nurse Duckett, which we didn't cover, but yeah, more than anything, it's just strange. I don't understand what it's trying to represent, but
it's very much got the feel of Mad Men. If
Yeah.
you've ever seen that.
yeah, Dunbar and Yossarian are basically just tossing Nurse Duckett between the two of them. It's almost like a scene from Clockwork Orange. They're just groping her, and she's bouncing back and forth between them, and it just doesn't really, to me, it doesn't really serve any purpose.
In the cartoon version, MASH, there's this Randy atmosphere as well, where all the nurses are kind of they seem to be sort of up for it all the time, but
yeah, it's a bit of a carry on atmosphere.
I was going to say, yeah, definitely a carry on feel to it.
Buxom nurses constantly up for it kind of atmosphere. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think maybe it was accurate that the degeneracy of the sexuality at the time it probably was probably not far off what they represent.
A lot of people say that at least using World War II as an example, that there was this kind of opening up of sexual mores because people felt like they might not have a chance otherwise, so they just that's what they say anyway.
It was like a shortening of the time preference.
Yeah.
Where they thought, well, it was I'll live for today because I might not live tomorrow kind of mindset.
Yeah.
And there's also the idea that a lot of the people won't have been anywhere before the war. Like a lot of these people in America, they won't have left America before the war, and the same with the British as well, I guess. And going on holiday would have been very rare.
Just realised
somewhere exotic.
A typo on hypocrisy as well. You really can see the descent into madness. The next slide just says all work and no play makes the Albion go insane.
We appreciate you cataloging all those characters.
Yeah, well, I don't. I look at it now and it just saddens me.
It's a lot of characters.
Next up, Lord of the Rings.
There were a lot of elves and a lot of hobbits.
Just on the black humor element, obviously I asked previously whether or not people thought it was actually funny or not. But as a satire piece, I mentioned that I think it works better with the escalation. Someone that we will be looking at down the line, Jonathan Swift. I want to cover his pamphlet, Modest Proposal, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but that to me is like to a T what I like in satire. That is a masterclass in satire. So we'll take a look at that sometime.
Yeah, a deadpan sort of.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of this is a difference in American and British humor, because deadpan. It is deadpan when it comes to something like Modest Proposal.
Yeah,
deadpan is slightly different in Catch-22, where it is that more snarky atmosphere, and I think that's more American and imported over.
I would say a black humor, like a good British black humor type thing, would be in Bruges.
Yeah, as we discussed, privately before. I think In Bruges does that very well, which does have a little bit of that snarkiness. But there is a definite distinction between the British and the American way that they do something like a satire, because I feel like there's more of a ramping up in an American satire.
Too obvious.
Yeah, I feel like it's less subtle, which works in some situations, and particularly I think that maybe this book was the catalyst for it, but ever since at least the 60s, particularly military satire, you basically can't do it in any other context other than the American military, because they're the military hegemon basically.
The other thing that's just occurred to me is in The Simpsons, is Skinner's real name Yossarian?
It's Armin Tanzarian.
I knew it was something like that. It's a similar plot,
unless you
plot
mean
line.
the real Skinner who has been rode out of out of Springfield on a train because everybody hated him. But
Yeah.
and then afterwards they decided never to talk about it again.
Yeah. And even just imply that he was a real son. Yeah. Anyway, tangent. Gone.
I'm not. I'm not au fait with Simpsons lore as much as I thought I was. Obviously,
It's an old episode.
I do recall there being two Skinners.
Just with the war theme, you know.
Yeah, that was Vietnam as well, wasn't it?
Yeah. There's a lot of I mean, obviously the Simpsons recalls on a lot of this stuff, and I would imagine the average Simpsons writer has probably read Catch-22 and thinks it's one of the best books ever written.
Yeah, and the average Family Guy writer has probably read it and thinks it's comedy gold.
I don't know. I would say the average Family Guy, probably. I don't know. Yeah, maybe not. Less so. I don't know.
What
I think,
about Dave?
Yeah, that would be an interesting question. Did Matt Parker and was it
Trey Parker and Matt Stone?
Matt Parker and Trey Stone.
Before you merge them into one person in your mind.
Matt Stone Parker.
I worry about you, Albin. Seriously.
This is what this book has done to me.
You've been disintegrating right before our eyes. I mean,
Yes.
this stream will be remembered for a long, long time, I think.
Yeah, if you don't ever see me again, you know why. It's because
I don't know.
I've flown into the side of a mountain.
The Simpsons writer, like the same kind of person who, on the left, who would quote 1984 while completely ignoring
Do you know Conan O'Brien?
Yeah.
He was a writer on The Simpsons, so that's that kind of person.
Oh, Jimmy Conan O'Brien Fallon.
No, Conan O'Brien wrote a Monorail song, for example.
Oh,
right.
That's actually one of the better episodes.
Yeah. His episodes are when he was a writer. Those were the best Simpsons episodes because he actually does have a sense of humor. But yeah.
Right. Let's wrap up. Moving on.
Moving on. We're only at 2 hours and 40 minutes in. I mean.
Okay. So, like we spoke about at the very beginning, when it was initially released, it was released to very mixed reviews. Most people were quite critical of it, but in the UK, it managed to get onto the bestsellers list almost immediately. And then, upon its re-release as a paperback, that was when America started to pick it up and use it as an anti-war novel and start to herald this as the best thing since sliced bread.
Oh, that makes sense. They were picking up on the Vietnam War parallel, probably, right? But not Heller necessarily.
Yeah, well, so I've got a couple of quotes that I think do some justice as to what I think happened with it. Unfortunately, I don't have who put this in their review of the book, but this one, I think, explains it quite well, where many early audiences like the book for just the same reasons that cause others to hate it. I think it was viewed as being a very countercultural novel. And so anything that was countercultural was promoted because, it was a way of putting a middle finger up to the man.
I can see that because back then you still had a lot of heroes from the Second World War.
Yeah,
they basically were the businessmen of the day, and so they would not speak negative about that war.
No, and there's also, especially in Britain, and probably even more so back then, there was a very, it's almost like, now kind of a lot of the identity that we've left that we're allowed is connected to Churchill in World War II and, the bulldog spirit, whereas this is like, actually your spirit, your spirit and everything that you like about it is all just futile nonsense,
Yeah, I think it's a sacred cow that he's putting on the chopping block. And
I mean-
obviously in the 60s even more so than now. But even still now, you look at Peter Hitchens when he released The Phony Victory. When was that? I think that was 2 years ago, and that was criticising whether or not Britain should have joined in. I think it was specifically World War II, but I think he covers both World Wars. And people were, slamming him constantly.
Yeah.
You got to get a similar book in a couple of years about pandemic responses, and because the current culture is okay. We are going full in, trying to do what we do in this way. Of course, we've never done this before, so it will not be perfect. Fine, but the counterculture movement will be from the youth. Will be like, it's insanity. And you're already seeing the beginnings of this already. This counterculture movement.
And if the reins are seized, the narrative could very easily be put as, look at the authoritarian conservative government trying to control everyone and using the pandemic as an excuse by the very same people that at the moment are, saying that basically it's as bad as the.
I think in the end it will just be anti-government, because because right now there is no really any critical response coming from within the government, so from within the system. Anyway, I think we're digressing into dangerous ground right now. So
no, that's fine. But
obviously, I'd never question COVID.
No, of course not.
But hypothetically,
save the NHS.
What I see more of is people criticising the lack of a lockdown, or he didn't lock down hard enough, he didn't lock down fast enough. So that would be the opposite. That's the opposite to that, and that I think that's more of a mainstream idea.
Listen, Karen.
Honestly, I don't.
Karen House.
Stop fiddling the lanyard of yours. We.
Hey, I invented that.
Yeah,
I'm claiming it.
You have a lot of people saying that right now, but they are not the young kids. They are the middle class, well-to-do people who basically just want to go back to 4 years ago or 5 years ago.
They want to go to holiday. They want to go on a holiday in the south.
Yeah, they want to go on a holiday. So please stay in your house so we can go on a holiday later. Maybe it's something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that won't be the countercultural narrative when these books are being written, is what I'm saying. Is that down the line, what you might find is that we'll have these narratives of, look at the Republican Party and the Conservative Party cracking down on people for something that was completely, overblown. But that'll be a narrative being pushed.
You're such a mediocre revolutionary, Albion. Seriously.
And it'll be that title. And it will just be framed however it wasn't strong enough, it was too strong, will just be framed however the current zeitgeist wants to frame it.
Both of those,
a bit like with World War II,
both of those narratives could be framed in a particular way. But let's put a pin in that. The other quote that I wanted to use, again, it does reflect kind of what we probably saw happening then, is how any kind of narrative could be spun onto it. And they were still 61. They were probably still trying to figure out what kind of narrative they wanted to put onto it, and that's why it took a while for this to get picked up. But the New Yorker described it as it doesn't even seem to have been written. Instead, it gives the impression of being shouted onto paper. Which I quite like.
I just kind of described it to my wife as someone had just written the book, dropped all the pages on the floor, and then just gathered them all up.
Mm-hmm. It's like a Zack Snyder cut. That's what we need. We need to not be so jumbled up. Where is? Oh, there we are. So there was an article that I read that was quite good. On a website which never has any decent articles. It was either the Daily Beast or something similar to that. Written by Ron Rosenbaum, where he described it as Helen not having an argument with war or with death, but with God himself. So I do wonder whether or not that was accurate. I feel like it might be.
It sounds like a bit hyperbolic, to be honest.
I was going to say, I think he's reading too much into it.
what, like trying to say, why are we here at all? Why is it like this at all?
Yeah, well, I feel like if you play up, I feel there's a lot of existentialism in there and nihilism, but it isn't always the forefront. So maybe it is a bit overblown. But I do think that has some.
Yossari knows why he's there. That's the point. He doesn't question it. It's just he can't escape the situation.
He knows why he's in the military. He knows why he's in the military, but he doesn't know why he's there in an existential manner.
Does any of
No,
it?
Because he does question that.
He's trapped there by people with different motives.
Yeah. No, but I don't mean his situation as in where he is spatially. I mean, as in life itself. And he has that conversation with Shaikov's wife, where he says anything that you could name that could be positive, I could name you two things that are negative, and he has a bit of a rant against God, saying
just because he's creative that he can do that.
Well, he doesn't do that though. He only ever gives one, so he lied.
Yeah,
but he wants to have a family, doesn't he?
I mean, the creative person in the story is Orr, so
yeah, I don't know if he wants to have a family, because I don't think he knows what he wants.
No, but he wants to get Natalie's whore and the girl, and he wants to find her, and he wants to run off to Sweden and live happily ever after with her, I guess.
He's just looking for meaning in his life, and
he's search for meaning,
and he's stuck. He doesn't have any choice because he can't make a choice. If he does, then he immediately ends up where he started. That's the Catch-22. So. And that happens throughout the book, and it's continually the structure of something insane happens because something other insane thing happened because some other insane thing happened, which would be resolved if only we do the same thing, but that doesn't happen because of this insane thing, and that just I see this pattern repeat, right. Like stamp everywhere in the book.
Like, here's one theme, and we're going to repeat it in 10 different ways. Yeah.
I don't know if you wanted my critical response, but anyway, you have it.
Well, what any final words on Catch-22? Do you recommend that people go and read this?
Yes, because I had to suffer through it, so you should as well.
Well, no, I mean, that many people can't be wrong. Let's go with it.
There's a very nice first edition hardcover, which is only $14,000 on sale right now.
I did see that. Yeah, lovely.
It is signed, so it is worth a read. Then
I suppose it's worth more now he's no longer with us.
Unless you are very interested, I would not recommend this book. And this is the first time I've said that.
Well, go watch the HBO series. Is it HBO?
Go watch the film. And actually, I would say if you want to consume this anyway, I don't usually say this because I want people to read and you get much more out of it. But if you have to, go listen to the audiobook. I think he does a very good job in the audiobook.
Yeah, the audiobook is very good. So
I don't.
We'll compromise.
This is a compromise. Do they still teach this in? Well, I say still. I don't know if they ever did. Do they teach this in American or any kind of school system?
I don't think so. Because usually when I look up audiobooks, if you go to the comments, it's mostly people saying, "I managed to cram this the night before," whereas this one wasn't. But again, most of the comments were people saying how much they loved it. So who knows?
I mean, it's got a lot of fans, but so does Friends.
It might be that somebody's paying them.
I read it in Canada, but I'm not sure it was actually on the syllabus.
There's no way they'd get kids to read this.
Yeah.
My school just got rid of English books, so. But then again, it's not my primary language, so.
I think England's going to get rid of most of the English books, aren't they?
Yes, I think no, I'm gonna cut that comment short. Actually. Anyway, moving on. Next book.
Shakespeare.
We're going to be looking at Animal Farm next.
Imagine being a professor in Shakespeare.
Yes, imagine.
Animal Farm. Sorry.
Animal Farm.
Animal Farm.
Snowball. Napoleon.
Yes, Animal Farm. We're going to be looking at in 2 weeks' time. On the run up to this, probably next Monday, I have ordered a couple of his essays, and we'll do an essay stream on one of those in the interim.
Are
Aside
you
from,
going to do? Are you going to do notes on nationalism?
I don't know. I've ordered a couple of his. I wanted to do a bit more, one that was a bit lesser well known,
less mainstream.
Yeah, I'm such a hipster with Orwell essays.
Yeah.
No, notes on nationalism is a good backup, but I just wanted to see if there's anything else that's not really been, discussed as much. So,
English language.
Yeah, that is one of the ones that I've ordered, and that is, I think, is a bit longer than I would hope to do a short stream on, but it would be a very good one to talk about in this kind of club. So we'll see.
You can't find much footage of him, can you? Oh well, because for some reason the BBC allowed his almost entire catalogue to burn.
Yeah, I wonder why. Anyway, let's wrap it up there before I say anything that's definitely going to get me kicked off, and to say I'll see everyone on the next episode.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.